Dorofayev walks it in front, jams it in, score! Goes off the glove of, or the stick of Bennington and in. And the Knights score first, 14:01 to go in the first period. Thomas to Buchnevich to Krug, shooting, and he hits the post. It's in the crease. It's locked under the pads of the goalie, and they get the referee to blow the whistle. Oh, man, one over the crossbar today. One on the crossbar, and the Blues have been close. Shen to the goal, and another post by the Blues. That's 3 in the period. Buchnevich busts up the middle. He gets hooked down to the Blues. Draw a penalty in overtime.
Penalty shot.
Penalty shot's being awarded.
Oh,
wow.
An overtime penalty shot.
This game has seen it all.
He'll bring it in on Logan Thompson. Buchnevich carries wide right, cuts it into the middle. Deke shoots, glove save. Thompson, and overtime will continue. And then Krug and Shen battle on there. Gates bring it out. They bring it to the front of the net. Shoot, score! The Vegas Golden Knights will win it in overtime and send the Blues 5 points out of a playoff spot, but the Blues got an important one.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN.
That's sour because you know you did that last night.
No, stop it.
You did that to that
They
damn
got a
team.
point.
With your 2.5 minute open and speaking about the damn bandwagon and choo-choo. Tonight's it. You did that.
I don't feel like I deserve any of the blame. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You can check us out on YouTube. The Graveyard Chat is over there as well. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL. I would have to imagine, Alex, that the vast majority of our listeners agree with me that I am not to blame. That was the same team that we have seen for most of this season. I actually thought they had, especially for the third period, a pretty inspired effort. They looked like they gave a you-know-what. And for much of the season, that hasn't been the case, so credit where it's due. Now, it's easier to care whenever you're in the midst of a playoff race, but you go 0 for 2 on the power play. You have 3 different shots that hit the crossbar. You let up 2 goals from your goalie that I think if you asked Benner, he'd probably want both of those back. But despite that, he played well for the vast majority of the game. It's hard to ask him to stand on his head for 60 minutes and then overtime as well. You have the opportunity on the penalty shot that you aren't able to make. Great save by their goalie. Like, sometimes you just lose. The other team's a little better than you. And last night, Vegas was a little better than the St. Louis Blues. Alex, the Blues aren't going to miss the playoffs because of that game. If, and I believe now, when the Blues miss the playoffs, it will be because of what they did earlier in the season. It will be the shutout that remains the only time that Columbus has shut out anybody all season long. It will be the lack of showing up against Nashville. It will be them saying, you know what, we'd rather be sleeping in our beds instead of playing against the Detroit Red Wings.
See what he does every single
true,
time. Barry Trotz wanted to sleep in his own bed, and look what worked.
Those are the things that led to this team missing the playoffs. Last night sucked. It was unfortunate. It's a bummer that they weren't able to get 2 points out of that to get the 4-point swing. But that's not what's going to miss this team in the playoffs. How you feeling today, Alex?
Not good. Not great, Bob. If I had to write a haiku for the Blues season, it would be stayed in the game. Stayed in the game. I know this is emotional right now. Stayed in the game as long as we could because of our goaltender until we found our legs. And that's what last night was. Like, Vegas outplayed you in the first and second period last night. Two teams that were desperate for points. One was more desperate for 2 whole periods. But your goaltender stood out and kept the game close. And so you entered the third period realizing that we had to throw everything we could at the net for us to win the hockey game. It felt like the tale of 3 periods. The first 2 periods, the Blues were trying to play that rush hockey where they were trying to get in with outlet passes and catch Vegas off their game. The problem was these dudes are 6'3" and bigger on the blue line, and they don't allow much. The third period was where they started just peppering shots to Logan Thompson and getting guys to the front of the net. Hence, one guy going towards the net is how they scored their lone goal in regulation. It's a bummer, and I understand a lot of people look at it and say, oh, well, Bannister screwed them because he did 11-7, and that didn't work. No, none of this has to do with anything they lost that game.
If the 11-7 screwed them, they wouldn't have had energy in the third period. And they did. They looked their best in the third period. And they've been
playing 11-7. They've been playing 10-4 for the last 3 weeks where Bolduc and Walker aren't playing hockey games in the third period, and they're only using 4 defensemen. So they've been doing that. This has nothing to do with that, and it has everything to do with the better team got the best of you. Vegas closed on every every single puck that was there, and the Blues didn't have an answer for it. They didn't have an answer to get to the front of the net, and that's okay. And as JR mentioned in his piece, and as BK mentioned in the open, this has more to do with where the season went wrong prior to tonight than just that game against the Vegas Golden Knights. And this big picture, and I'm not going to write them off because I've seen crazier things happen, but you're as close to impossible as you can be without being impossible.
Yeah, they're done.
Because
I'll write them off.
You've got 10 games left. They've got 11 games left. They're 5 points up. The bare minimum, let's just say that Vegas loses every single game in overtime.
Wow, that would be a collapse.
That's 11 points. That means you have to get 8 wins, 16 points to tie them in points and hope that you have the tiebreaker, which you trail them by 2 right now. So you are going to have to basically go 8-2, 9-1, 10-0.
Yeah, you got to win out. Like, to have a realistic shot of being able to get to the postseason,
And
you got to win out, and even then, it's not a guarantee.
And hope that Vegas stumps their toe at some point. But the problem with that is, I mean, yeah, as tough as their schedule looks, where they play Nashville tonight, they do have 5 games that you look at and you say they're going to win that hockey game. So it sucks that you missed out on that extra point. It sucks that you didn't have the third period, that in the first and the second. But this goes back to the Columbus losses, the San Jose losses, the Chicago losses, before I even look at last night and say, well, that's where they lost the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's where I am. The inconsistencies, though, they did occur last night to where they didn't really start playing until the third period. The inconsistencies of the whole season are the reason that they're not going to the playoffs. Last night was just a confirmation that the Blues are in another tier below the playoff teams. Yep. That's what last night was. And I think we all kind of felt that way going into that one. But last night was the one that was the confirming nail in the coffin. And you're right. Wasn't necessarily last night was the one that ended the playoffs hopes. When you don't show up against Columbus, you don't show up in games prior in those points at the time. And you knew at the time that was probably going to be the one that was going to come back and haunt them. We said at the time that Columbus game was a massive issue for the St. Louis Blues team. And now you just got confirmation of it. So anything that they had from last night, I thought they played well in the third period, and they held their own in the first 2. Bennington bailed them out. They're just not a playoff team. And I felt that for a long stretch of this season. And last night, the Vegas Golden Knights just said, hey, look, it was cute. You guys made this little run. We're going to make sure that we get the 2 points that we need, and we're going to make sure that we have the edge for the playoffs here. Yeah,
so Vegas, if they go 8-3 or better down the stretch, the Blues are eliminated, regardless of what the Blues do.
16 points for Vegas. It's over.
It's over. So it's hard for me to imagine. Hard for me to imagine a scenario in which the Blues are able to get in. There's tiebreakers working against them. There's this specific game that's working against them. We said yesterday, it's a must-win, a legit must-win game, and it was a must-win in regulation. Winning in overtime helps you. It gets you a little closer, but you needed the 4-point swing. You needed to get 2, and you needed them to get 0 last night head-to-head. That was really the one way to get yourself fully back into this. So it brings up the question, Alex, that I'm going to ask, that Alex and T-Bone are going to get mad at me for even asking.
No. T-Bone and I talked about this before. I'm turning a new leaf. I can't get upset with you for your opinion. I just need you to work on your tone here.
So I want to say up front, I don't think this would have worked. I think it would have just resulted in the Blues getting 0 points last night in the season, even coming to more of a thud of an ending. And I understand why they didn't do it. So I want to say those disclaimers on the front end. This is not one of those things where I'm like, none of this makes sense. They're so stupid. No, I understand the other side of this. But I am curious, because I felt this way while we were watching in the final 2 minutes of the game. Should the Blues have pulled their goalie? Because if we believe the Blues' real only chance of getting to the postseason was to get 2 points in that one and to have the Vegas Golden Knights get 0, well, there was only one way to accomplish that goal. It was to win in regulation. And the best chance to win in regulation is by having an extra attacker. Now, you were tied at the time. And the Blues have been terrible in goalie pulled situations this year. In fact, if you're looking at like the plus minus in those spots, there is no team worse in that specific situation this year than the St. Louis Blues. And again, to argue against myself, the Blues had a penalty shot in overtime to win the game. Like, you couldn't have asked for anything more. They had a chance to win it there. But again, that would have meant 2 points for them, 1 point for Vegas, so you only get the +1 there. Alex, would you have considered, if you were in Drew Bannister's shoes, final couple of minutes of the game, going for broke, saying, you know what, we either get the full 4-point swing or our season ends tonight, would you have been willing to do that? Would you have considered it at least?
I probably would have slipped into my head, and I would have shut it down really quick if I was Bannister. I understand that you needed those points, and you needed to make sure Vegas didn't get the points on the other side. But the more important part for the Blues was just to get 2 points. And it sucks that they would have gotten a point, but 2 points was crucial. And I mean, you're 10-3 in overtime, and they're 8-7. So you're thinking, let's just get to overtime, and then we'll go into this scenario, and we'll pull out the extra point, and we'll figure out what happens with that point that we let up down the stretch. If you pull the goalie on the other side, and I asked Joe this last night on postgame because I do think it's a very interesting topic. Joe even said, not only do you really risk your season being over if that puck goes in on the empty net and you don't score, but you risk losing your team. And what he meant by that is puck goes in, you're 6 points out with 10 games to go. Yeah, it's mathematically not over, but it's a tough hill to climb. But you also now have to re-engage your roster of basically explaining to them, we needed those points, and hoping you don't lose those guys. I think if you're a secure head coach, I think you could probably do that. I think if the Blues would have gained a penalty at the end of the third period with a couple of minutes left, I would have pulled the goaltender. But at just 5-on-5, for how much Vegas was closing down puck possession and stopping the Blues before they could get anything going, I think it was way too risky for that team's season to really be over last night if they wouldn't have converted.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done it either because I just think the risk was too much. When you look at them,
what's the risk in not doing it though?
I think if you don't do it and you still get 2 points, I looked at it this way. So we all know
and you're down
the power
by 3
play percentage
points in the standings.
But that's a lot.
So,
that's a lot more doable than being 6.
Yeah, like the playoff percentages, like you get 2 points, you get the full swing. Like that was the best case scenario. You get 2 points, they get 1. I still think you're probably
your percentage goes up a little bit.
It's going to go up a little bit, but probably not as much as you need to. You get 1 point like they did last night, it still sits low. You get 0, it sits really low. And this is where you and I just philosophically view things differently because you always look at the ceiling of things and I always look at like what's the floor,
what's the worst case,
what's the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario for me is your season's done then. And like I think their season's done with the loss last night.
That's the thing is like we all agree though today we're coming on the show today and all of us all of us agree,
but the players in that locker room still believe there's a chance. And I think if you pull the goal,
if they believe it today that there's a chance, that they could have believed it if they had lost in regulation.
See, I think they look at that and say, well, that was our season, that was the riskiest thing you could have done
today. I don't even care about what the players say because I think they know it's done. I know they.
But that's why the coach isn't doing it. The coach isn't doing it because you got to worry about 23 guys that you're putting on the ice for 10 more games.
Last night, if they lost in overtime, regulation,
I don't think they do. I think they truly believe that, and they do have a chance. I mean, it's impossible. But
speaking to the media, I've learned in my 4 years, however long I've been doing this, anything that comes through the media is just the chalk answer. It's what they're taught in media school. So them saying all the right things last night, if we still have a shot, they know they don't have a shot. Like it's hard to look at their scenario to get in. They said all the right things last night. I think they all know inside that locker room it's over. So I understand. My biggest thing though is I think for sure you were done if you lose in regulation.
Today that it's over, then why not try?
I do think they feel a little bit better if they win in overtime. And I don't mind playing for overtime in that spot. That's what I'm saying is lose either way. I think you are out of the playoff picture. I think if you even win in overtime, it still is a better playoff percentage chance than losing at all.
It's unlikely, but it's possible. And this is where, like, if you win that game in regulation, it's not only possible, you've got a real shot. If you win that game in regulation, you're at 81 points today. Vegas is at 83. Now, they do have a game in hand. That's noteworthy. But they also have a tougher schedule. And now it's not hard, in fact, to convince yourself, hey, Blues have a real shot to be able to get into the playoffs. But as is, they're 5 points ahead. Like, you're basically done today because you lost in overtime. So I think I would have done it. I'm more of a risk taker. Like in the NFL, I think there are multiple situations late in games where coaches should be going for it, even on fourth down. The Super Bowl, no coach would do this, maybe with the exception of Dan Campbell because he loses his mind sometimes. But like late in that game, I can't remember exactly where they were. I think they were on their own 30, but I thought Kyle Shanahan should have gone for it on like 4th and 2 from the inside of their own end. And it was because if you give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes in that spot, he's going to score, man. It ain't going to go well for you. He decided not to. We all know how the game ended. That doesn't mean that it would have worked for him. But the upside there is you get to continue. You have a real shot there. I thought last night given what was at stake, given what we knew going into that game of this being a spot where you need 2 points, they need to get 0 for you to really believe you've got a shot in the playoffs. I understand what it means inside of your locker room. I don't blame them for not doing it. It is a huge risk. I just think the risk of not doing it was also significant, and that we all know today they're not making the playoffs. And that was, it's like a 50-50 proposition when you get to the overtime. The other thing that I would be curious about, I don't know that the NHL would ever do this, but in overtime, I do think you should be allowed to reject or decline.
I don't think it should be overtime.
Penalty shot.
I think it should be all times. You should reject the penalty shot for a power play if you want it.
Now, the numbers would go against this. The numbers would tell you the penalty shot's like a 50% conversion rate, and a power play, even the best in the league, is like 20 to 30%. There are other things that come into play here in overtime, especially 4-on-3 is a little different than your typical power play opportunity. The other thing that comes into play is during the course of a game, there can be momentum gained. There can be energy that is sapped from the opposition. You get a bunch of shots on net, like you can gain some momentum that way. So I get all of that as well, but that is something that I do think the NHL should take a look at, especially like even if you just wanted to do it for overtime, I think it's something that should be allowed. Yeah. And that would have been something that I think last night for the Blues, they probably would have accepted.
I think the power plays are more exciting, and I think that's what lost them that game. You see, the momentum gets sucked away from you in overtime when you don't score on that penalty shot, and then look at the sequence of events. You lose the faceoff after that penalty shot. Vegas gets the puck, they go into the zone, and you never get it again. So yeah, I think penalty shots should be kind of that option for coaches. Do you want it, or would you rather have a power play? Because the best power, if you're Edmonton, as much as you love a penalty shot, unless it's Connor McDavid on a penalty shot, we'll take the power play.
Sure. By the way, last thing here, I did put out on Twitter yesterday, would you have been in favor of going all in for the extra 2 minutes of regulation, or for the final 2 minutes of regulation by pulling Binnington? It's about 50-50. There's about 500 votes in this so far, and it's like almost exactly 50-50 on whether or not people would have done it. Slight lean towards no. And I don't blame people for that. I get it. That's
Tell him why I really disagree with it. His idea came from Dom, the one that's saying that it was a good idea.
I was thinking it as I was watching the game, and then I saw Dom put it out there, and I was like, I think that's probably, if you're just looking at expected value of the game, I think technically that's probably the right way to go about it. I'm sure, like, if Jamie's listening to this right now, he's probably throwing his hat at his radio, being like, "You
got a hat trick?
You idiot!
Love how we were on the same page.
You got to give yourself a chance." And I get it. I don't think any coaches would actually do this other than Minnesota's.
Patrick Waugh would too.
But I think it's probably something I would have considered. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll ask this of Jeremy Rutherford. I want to get his thoughts. He had a great piece earlier today over on The Athletic about the Blues season effectively coming to an end last night and why nobody should be surprised by that result. JR joins us at 11:30. But coming up next, another outfielder goes down to injury. Who could have seen this one coming? We'll talk about it, what it means for Victor Scott next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my dentist, 100 West Dental. Dr. Pryor and his team are incredible, and now I look forward to going to the dentist. You've heard my story in the past of having a dentist that didn't focus on the preventative procedures, looking for that long-term care with my mouth. They missed a tumor that was lying on my jawline for 8 years, didn't take the x-rays that they were supposed to be taking, and then when the tumor was found, I lost 7 teeth. I had nerve damage. It was a tumor that was removed, tons of medical bills. It was a nightmare, all because I didn't have a dentist that worried about the long-term health of my overall oral health. And now I have that with Dr. Pryor and his team. Look, patient experience is so important. The modern technology is the part that I love the most about their office. Everything is up to date, and it's that new exciting technology that gets you interested. They've even got this technology for Invisalign that can show you what a simulation of your mouth will look like if you go through the Invisalign package. So just make sure you are with the right dentist that's taking care of you and your mouth for the long term, and that's 100 West Dental. You could book online. You can even do an online consultation at 100westdental.com. Get with the best at 100 West.
So the Cardinals are going to be without potentially Dylan Carlson for a little bit. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month. We don't have any update today. But yesterday, there was a collision in right center field as Jordan Walker and Dylan Carlson were trying to track down a line drive. Jordan Walker ends up stopping at the very last second and basically barrel rolls into Dylan Carlson's legs. Carlson then kind of slides into the warning track, and he hurts his head, shoulders, knees, and toes. It's not what you want. We don't really have an update on this, Alex, as of today. But yesterday, Ollie Marmol said, quote, he's a little banged up, combination of the shoulder when he hit the ground, his hip, and his ankle. So I don't have a whole lot yet other than that he doesn't really feel good.
Nice. We're on top of it.
My guess is this is going to require an IL stint. It kind of felt that way yesterday. Maybe this is one of those things kind of similar to the Sonny Gray deal where we overreact in the moment and it ends up not being as serious as it felt when it happened. But let's go down this path for a second, Alex. Let's operate under the assumption that Carlson, not seriously hurt, but hurt enough that he's going to have to miss a little bit of time. What happens? What do the Cardinals do?
Well, let me ask you the follow-up question. How confident are you that Tommy Edman's going to be back soon?
Not at all on Tommy Edman. Lars Noot pretty confident. I think Noot will be back within the first 10 days of the season.
I would still.
I have no idea when Tommy Edman will be back.
I would still bring up Victor Scott in this scenario. And I think a lot of people will probably say, well, Lars Nootbaar will be back in 10 days, like you said, BK, and you put him in center field and you'll be fine. Don't care. He'll be back. I could put him in left field, and then I've got Brendan Donovan as a utility man, and I can rotate him throughout. I want somebody playing defense in center field for me that I trust, and I get that Michael Ciani has looked fine in center field. I don't want fine right now. If I'm putting Michael Ciani in my 9-hole and I'm using him for his defense, then why the hell wouldn't I get a guy for his defense and his base running and his ability to change the outlook of a pitch because of his speed? Why wouldn't I put him in my lineup over Michael Ciani?
Yeah, I'm with you.
And don't give me the crap of we're protecting him, because I hate that.
There is no excuse at this point if Carlson's going to be out for an extended period of time. You don't have any other outfielders on the 40-man roster. You have to make a move in some regard.
Yeah.
Like, the only other options for you to be able to call up are Jared Young, Alfonso Rivas, Lucan Baker, and Pedro Pajes.
And the depth of this team is
Pedro's
awesome.
not coming up. He's a catcher. So it's Lucan Baker, Rivas, or Jared Young. Those are the three. I guess Fermin technically could be called up as well. Those are your options, and they're not going with any of those guys. You'd have to call up Victor Scott. And you'd have to say, hey, goodbye to probably Alfonso Rivas or Jared Young. Those guys are probably going to have to be removed from the 40-man roster. And guess what?
How will I remember that era?
That's not a problem at all. The other option, I guess you could go with like a Thomas Ajacey if you really wanted to go that route as well.
I'm sure I'm putting him in center field.
Exactly. Now you're going with Ciani in center, and you're just hoping and praying that nobody gets hurt. And you've got Burleson, Walker, and Donovan as the other three that can play in the outfield if you need to. Again, I don't view that as particularly likely, though. I don't think they're going to go that route. I think they're going to have to call up Victor Scott if Dylan Carlson has to start the year on the IL. This sucks, man. It sucks for Dylan Carlson. I know that he's a guy that a lot of people are just done with. They want to throw to the side, and I don't blame you. Last couple of years have been bad, man. It's been mostly this. It's been a lot of injuries. It's been a lot of inconsistencies. He hasn't hit right-handed pitching. Like, it's frustrating to watch. But he did play really well in the spring for the most part. And he earned an opportunity, whether it was in left field or in center. He earned the right to first refusal, essentially, in the outfield. And now he's going to miss out on that most likely when things finally opened up for him. So I do really feel badly for him. We have gotten a couple of texts. T-Bone, we were talking about this before the show today. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Somebody said, communicate in traffic, Dylan. That's your job. You're the center fielder. We were talking about this before the show. Did you blame Carlson in that spot?
I didn't. It is the center fielder's job to call off somebody, but I will say this. If you don't think you can get to that ball, and I don't think either one of those guys thought they could really get to it, it was almost a 50-50 proposition, you're taught not to call off the other outfielder unless you are 100% you're going to catch the ball. Because otherwise, you slow up, for example, you slow up Jordan Walker when he hears you saying, I got it, I got it, I got it. And if he slows up and you miss, then, well, who knows? Maybe Walker could have caught that ball if he's going 100%. So I didn't really blame any of them. It does feel like there have been communication issues out in the outfield, in center field with Dylan Carlson, but that's something that you start to learn over time. You know, when you're in right field, as Dylan Carlson was coming up through the system for the Cardinals, you're the guy that gives weight to the center fielder because the center fielder is in charge of the outfield. That is something that Carlson will have to learn and have to make sure he communicates better. I watched replay. To be honest, I couldn't tell if he called it or not. If he didn't, I still wouldn't blame him, and I still wouldn't blame Walker because I didn't think either one of them had a really 75% or better chance to catch that baseball. So I don't really put any blame on that. I think that's a freak baseball accident that occurred yesterday.
Yeah, I think both of them need to be better with communication.
I'd agree with
Walker's
that.
had issues with this in the past as well. Carlson's had issues when he's in center field, I think, with communication. Anecdotally, I feel like it got better when Tommy Edwin was in center field last year, patrolling things out there, and I thought that was a big part of it, was just communications with the corner outfielders got better with Tommy Edman in center field. Regardless of what happens from here, the Cardinals need to commit to somebody in center. They have used way too many guys out there in center field since the start of last season. It was O'Neill, it was Nootbaar, it was Carlson, it was Edman, it was Ciani, it was, Richie Palacios. Like, they used like 7 different guys in center field at any point, at a different point last season. That's tough as a corner outfielder. Like, imagine being Jordan Walker trying to learn on the job, and you have 7 different dudes that you've played next to. Yeah, I'm going to imagine that communication is a little different with each and every one of them. Eventually, you just want him to be comfortable out there. Walker is not innocent in these scenarios a lot of the time, but I would like to see them just commit to somebody. They wanted to do it with Edman, and then the injuries popped up. I think it's time. Just say, Victor Scott, you're our guy. We're going to ride with you. Yes, it's probably going to impact your development. So be it. We have no other option at this point. We are between a rock and a hard place. Let's see what the speed and defense looks like, and we'll try to make it work for us.
And you cannot, in my opinion, you cannot call up a Fermin, a Jared Young, anybody else on that formula that you listed, because if you did have another injury in center field to Siani, if that's who the guy is currently, you don't have a center fielder on the roster. You'd have to play Donovan in center field. You can't operate with that. You have to have a backup center fielder, so you have to call up Scott.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Alex Ferrario, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we'll get to questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get those in. Coming up next, though, we'll have some questions for Jeremy Rutherford, our Blues insider here on 101 ESPN.
Tara Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Golden Knights beat the Blues last night 2-1 in overtime as the Blues miss out on a potential 4-point swing. They'll be back in action on Thursday when they host the Calgary Flames. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. And the Cardinals wrap up their spring training slate as they're in Arizona to take on the Chicago Cubs today. 2:05 will be first pitch, and Kyle Gibson will get the start against Shota Imanaga. The Sports Update driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoPlex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alex, I'm going to read you real quick from Jeremy Rutherford's piece earlier today over on The Athletic. Quote, the Blues didn't lose and cost themselves 2 points because of their lineup construction. In a must-win matchup against the Golden Knights, they lost for the same reasons they've lost a lot of games this season. They didn't have the start that was needed. Their goaltending can only bail them out so much. And we've been honest about this all season. They just aren't a playoff caliber club. Jeremy Rutherford wrote that earlier today on The Athletic. He joins us now via the 101 ESPN hotline. You can read his work over at The Athletic and follow him on Twitter at JP Rutherford. JR, appreciate the time as always, man. I loved your piece earlier today. I thought you took the exact right tone on it of, hey, listen, this was not a one-game situation. This was what we've seen from them all season long. What did you learn about this club, if anything, last night in their loss against the Vegas Golden Knights?
Yeah, thanks, BK. I mean, you cover the team all season and for year after year, and you hope that you have the right tone. But I got to admit, like when the cursor's blinking last night after the game, you just hope that you can put it in the right words. And I don't think last night was a spot to be overly critical or point things out, call guys out. I know there's been a lot of that in the comment section today, you know, and listening to some people. But I think it just is what it is. And I think what I took away from last night is it was a good game. I think they played hard. I think that you could tell that they want to keep going in that direction and see if they can pull this out in terms of making the playoffs. But there's just not everything there. And you can talk about lamenting shots hitting the post. You can talk about missing a penalty shot in OT. But at the end of the day, what we've seen so many times with this team happen. And, you know, Alex, you always give me trouble about my analogies. Here's one. Now, here's a far-fetched one. Here's one that...
He's good at these, is why I give him trouble, but he acts like he's terrible at them.
Well, let me say this, and I use this in everyday life, you know, talking to my wife and talking to the family. You know, some people will head out in their backyard, and they got their new shoes on, and they step in a pile of dog poop, and they just say, well, if I wouldn't have done this, if I wouldn't have made that turn, if I wouldn't have lost my balance, you know, I wouldn't have stepped in the dog poop. Well, the big picture, and I'm a big picture guy, is there's 100 piles of dog poop in your backyard. You're probably going to step into something. So there's situations where you just have to step back. And, you know, that analogy not meant to compare to the Blues. It's just big picture is that, you know, this was a season where you knew they were going to run into some of these issues. They ran into them a lot this year. And I think last night they did so again. So that's my takeaway.
My bigger question is why do you get all those piles of dog poop in your backyard? Why aren't you picking them up, JR?
Yeah, the little guy needs to get out there and do some work and earn that, that chore money.
You should have told me. I would have told him that last night when I saw him. But here's the thing, Jerry, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but you know, the last two games of the Blues have lost, one against Colorado that they played well. It's just you didn't come out on top. And then last night, you play well, you just don't come out on top. But there are significant differences between those teams and the Blues. And what I thought last night was the size of Vegas's defense. If you're Doug Armstrong and you're looking at this team and more than likely another year where you miss the playoffs, is this about changing the way that the identity of the team is for next season rather than just making little tweaks?
Well, yeah, I think so, but I also think that you're only going to be able to do that if there's some moves out there to be made, and I don't know that the ones that you can make in one off season are going to be enough to even get you going in that direction. And so I agree with you. We did the podcast this morning with Donnie Fandango, Last Minute Blues podcast, and we talked about it a little bit, Alex, is that these teams that the Blues have played well against here lately, the Colorados and the Vegases, I mean, they're just built differently. And I think, you see some size, you see some physicality, and I think you see teams that really close out plays. And that's one thing that the Blues have struggled with here the past couple of years. So, can Doug Armstrong and, the brass sit up in the office this offseason and say, hey, here's what we need to go after? They can, and they can say, even if it takes a couple of years to get there, that's what we want to look like in 2026. It's just a matter of, okay, how do you go about that? How do you make these moves? How do you get rid of some of these long-term contracts? How do you speed up, which you don't want to do in the case of, Jimmy Snuggerud, Dalibor Dvorsky. It's tough trying to speed those guys up. But how do you get to a point where you can look at the ice and see the type of team that we've seen the Blues lose to in the last couple weeks?
Jared, would you have considered pulling the goalie last night into the third period?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think that you have to be a major risk taker. I think that's got to be your personality. I think you would have had to talk about that going into the game.
That makes sense, yeah. Yeah, that feels right.
Hey, if we're in this situation, this is what we're going to do. I think that you could make an argument to do that just because of their predicament. I don't know that I would have done it for the reasons that you guys mentioned earlier. I think that if you can win it, even in OT, you still have your confidence. Hey, we just beat a good team. Now we've won 7 of 8. We're only a few points out. And if you give up that empty net goal, and I know you're talking about regulation, but whether you give it up in regulation or you give it up in OT, I just think it's tough to pick up and move on from there. And look, like you guys said, they had a chance to win it in OT, and who's to say that they didn't have a chance to win it at the end of the regulation without pulling the goalie too? So obviously it would have been a big risk. I don't know that it's one that I would have taken.
JR, the part that I find interesting with this 10-game stretch now for the Blues, which, look, I mean, realistically, they do have a chance, although it seems as close to being impossible as you can be, they do still have a shot. How does Drew Bannister approach this roster moving forward? Because, we talked a lot about in the past of needing to get games for Scott Perunovich to get his restricted free agency status. Now you've got Bolduc and Dean that you try and get more games in. And then, of course, the one thing that every Blues fan is talking about is Jimmy Snuggerud following college.
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, Perunovich just needs a couple more games, and the Blues will have his rights this offseason as a restricted free agent. So I think that one's kind of settled. That's why maybe you've seen him in the lineup for a long stretch. I think with the Sundqvist injury, which we don't have an update yet, but it looked pretty serious, you'll likely see Bolduc and or Dean both in there, if they go back to 12 forwards and don't have Oscar Sundqvist. So I think there's not as many questions about the lineup and what to do with it for these final 10 games. Certainly, if they lose a couple more and they fall out of it, you're going to see those guys play. And then we'll find out what happens with Jimmy Snuggerud. And for those who don't know, he plays with his University of Minnesota team on Thursday night. If they lose, their season's done, and he can talk to the St. Louis Blues about turning pro or whichever avenue they want to pursue with Jimmy Snuggerud. We've said it a million times. We'll say it 1,000,001. If he plays one game with the St. Louis Blues this year, he burns 1 year off that 3-year entry-level deal. So that's a major question to ask from both sides. But let's fast forward a few days here, and the University of Minnesota season is over. You could see Jimmy Snuggerud. At least they're going to have talks with the Blues to see how they want to approach this.
Is that smart to burn that year in your guys' mind?
Yeah,
Alex, I'm asking you as well.
Yeah, let me set this up, and Alex, you can give your answer here too. Some people might say, okay, what does that mean, burning a year? How does that affect the Blues? Here's as clearly as I can say it. You have 3 years on your entry-level deal. All players who come into the league have a 3-year entry-level deal, like Jimmy Snuggerud does, and you have him at that set price, $900,000 or so, for the next 3 years, regardless of how he produces, how many points he puts up, whatever. That's great for your salary cap. Now, if he plays one game, it burns 1 year. That means next year is year 2, and then the following year is year 3. And then, guys, he can negotiate a contract, and based on his production, it could be a lot more than $900,000. So if you burn a year just for 1 or 2 games, just keep in mind that you're eating up one of those years.
So the one thing that I thought of, JR, with that is how many games would you deem reasonable to burn a year for Jimmy Snuggerud? Like, what are you trying to accomplish by burning a year of that entry-level contract? Obviously, you want some NHL experience. You want him to get a feel for what the season is going to be like. How much does that benefit you? Because if they play on Thursday, it's unrealistic to think they lose Thursday, and then next thing you know, Saturday, he's suiting up for a game against the Sharks. So now you're getting into April, and you're talking about having 8 games in April. Is 5 games enough to sit there and say, yeah, you know what, that was justifiable for us to burn a year of Jimmy Snuggerud's contract? Because for me personally, I don't know if burning any of them is worth it if you're out of a playoff race. I'd rather just do the PTO and put him in the minors to get a taste of it, or have him rest up for camp the next season.
I don't know that it's worth it, like you, even if he can play 4 or 5 games. But here's the one thing that you have to deal with if you're the NHL organization is that these guys want to play. And part of the selling point for asking them to turn pro and telling them that they're ready is they say, hey, I want to play in some games down the stretch. And look, they want to burn the year because it gets them closer to negotiating a bigger contract post entry level deal. So sometimes you're dealing with that. So it's not as easy as the Blues saying, hey, let's preserve this year. We want the 3-year entry level deal. You know, that's not how it usually works. So we'll see where Jimmy stands on that. You know, talking to him a month or two ago, guys, he could not be more giddy knowing that the NHL career was right around the corner. So I think he wants to play. But big picture, I mean, how many times do you think about a player 3 or 4 years into his career and say, wow, good thing he came and played those 3 games that first year, because it really got him going and kick-started his off season. I don't think that's the case. Doesn't seem worth it to me. If you're the Blues, you're not in a playoff race. You know, at least it doesn't appear to be one. So we'll see what happens with that come this weekend.
Can you recall, JR, the last time a player played at the end of the season coming out of college for the Blues? Like, the first one that I can think of is Mitch Rinke, but I don't really think that falls into the same conversation as what Snuggerud was.
Yeah, no, that was different. He was a college free agent, and the Blues, you know, selling point to him was, hey, sign with us, and we'll get you in a game or two down the stretch. But to my knowledge, you're right. You nailed it. Mitch Rinke is the last player I can recall that did that.
Hey, JR, we appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. Great work over at The Athletic. People can read your piece breaking down exactly what last night meant and why it was more of a symptom than the root cause of the Blues' problems over on The Athletic, and find it on Twitter at JP Rutherford. We'll talk to you again next week, my man.
Watch out for that dog poop. Thanks, guys.
That's Jeremy Rutherford joining us as he does each and every Tuesday throughout the Blues season here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, as we were talking with him, I was just kind of going through some of the teams around the Western Conference, the legitimate contenders, and just writing down the sizes of their top 4 defensemen. Mm-hmm. Man, you got some like oak trees out there. And
all of them are 6'2" or bigger.
Meanwhile, the Blues aren't necessarily that way, I would say, is a fair way to describe it. I do think it's something, and you've been on this train for a while now. I don't think that I'm breaking any news by any stretch of the imagination to you. You've been talking for a while that the Blues need to overhaul their defensive core. I think that's more than a reasonable opinion to have. I still think number 2 center might be their top need going into the offseason, but increasing the size that you have on your blue line is something that should also be a priority, in my opinion. Watching that game last night against Vegas, and it's not the first time we've seen it. I feel like this whenever they go up against Dallas or Nashville or Vancouver, and you see the size that they have on their blue line. It is something that I think the Blues are missing. And I understand why they went this direction with the puck movers defensively. You felt like the game was moving more in that direction. The rush style offense, you felt like the game was moving in more in that direction. But the truth is, it just hasn't. It did not move in that direction the way that Army expected it to. They guessed, and they guessed wrong, and now they're paying the price for it.
Look at how many high-danger chances you had last night. Now, you had the same amount as Vegas did, 8 and 8, but 5 of them came in the third period when you were basically playing like bleep it hockey, we have to win this game. You had 3 in the first 2 periods where the other team had 2 in the first, 2 in the second. The other team limits the amount of times you go to the front of the net because of their size. And I think you have one guy right now that I look at and I say he's a top 4 defenseman, no doubt about it, and that's Colton Parayko. I actually would put Torrey Krug in this conversation. I think the fight that Torrey Krug plays with...
I thought he played really well last night.
He was one of your best players last night. He had 9 shot attempts. He had 6 shots on goal. The dude plays with the ferocity. And you remember, we talked about it at the beginning of the season. Can he do anything to endear himself to Blues fans? And I think he did so with a bad plus-minus and not with a lot of points.
Agreed.
Because of his attitude. Other than that, I'm not sure your top 4 poses any threat to other teams. You've kept it close. Your goaltending has been the reason you've kept it close. But moving forward, you can't keep that up. You can't rely on your goaltenders to keep stealing you hockey games. And, man, I look at Vegas last night, and after we talked to Dave Gosher yesterday, I don't know if they're going to try and keep Noah Hannafin. But if they do, they're going to have to move on from a guy maybe like Nicholas Hague, who's been a healthy scratch for them. You're going to have to isolate somebody who's willing to give up a 6'4" or bigger left-handed defenseman to play on your top pair with Colton Parayko.
By the way, we got a couple of people that texted in. Jaden Schwartz would be another one that came up during his college, or right after his college season, it sounds like. So that would be one other that you could throw into that mix as well. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard off of Chippewa, which is now open for its 95th season. Think about that. 95 years of families have been being served by Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. And look, it's all about consistency. It's about tradition. They remain steadfast in the commitment to quality, consistency, and tradition. And when you visit Ted Drew's, you know that you're building up one of those St. Louis history memories with you and your family. I still remember those trips myself when I was younger, and now I get to do those with my family. And look, they got so many different flavors you can ask for. You can mix and match. They've got specialty flavors like the turtle. It's Ted's delicious vanilla custard, hot fudge, caramel, pecans. It's available as a concrete or a sundae. You can also buy it in a quart and take it home with you and have Ted Drew's famous frozen custard when you're at home. While you're there, walk across the parking lot, check out the Ted Drew's gift shop where you can shop for Ted Drew's apparel, hats, drinkware, gift cards. All of that is in the gift shop at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. Get on out there tonight. Get out there this weekend and enjoy Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. Ted Drew's, it really is good guys and gals.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, did you see Jordan Hicks yesterday? And if so, what'd you think? T-Bone, I know you sent this. You think Jordan Hicks is the one that got away for the Cardinals, huh?
Yeah, whoa. That was filthy stuff from Jordan Hicks. I still wouldn't give him the contract because I still don't think he's going to last as a starter. But he wasn't throwing as hard. He's throwing 97, so he's tampered it down to last longer. And my God, did his stuff look filthy last night.
It's like he got the right pitching coach that unlocked his potential.
He's going to be an interesting case study. Yep. It's kind of like what we talked about with the defensemen that have left St. Louis. Like you look at Wallman and Dunn, and you go, why didn't that work here? If Hicks leaves the Cardinals and ends up being successful as a starter, I think it's fair to go, okay, why couldn't they make him a starter? Why did they not try it as a starter?
And I think
or they did.
They did. It didn't work.
But it was last minute. Like, I remember that year they started him in 2022.
They never gave him a real shot.
Yeah, it was like, all right, we're going to have Verhagen be the starter. And then, I remember him getting just absolutely destroyed in his last spring training out, and they went, oh, crap, we don't have a fifth starter.
Organizational failures, not necessarily like, I would not place the blame on Dusty Blake specifically. Agreed. I would say that is an organizational failure if he goes out elsewhere and in his first real opportunity to become a starter. Like, this isn't 5 years later where 7 different teams tried it failed with 6 of them, and then finally 7 years later he's got a completely different arsenal and it's working now. That's different. This is something to monitor. I definitely think it's something worth watching, because if Hicks goes out there and for, what is it, $11 million, I think was his contract on a year in, year out basis.
To what you're paying Kyle Gibson to do?
Yeah, that's going to be tough.
That's a problem.
That's going to be tough.
Gibson stuff has not looked as good as that did last night.
And it means that you could have just had him in the rotation over Steven Matz all this time for literally the exact same amount of money. Again, that's tough. That's a tough look. Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn are about the same amount of money going into this year as Jack Flaherty and Jordan Hicks would have been. By the way, Jordan Hicks and Jack Flaherty have both been significantly better in spring. It's just worth monitoring. I think that the Jack Flaherty thing, it was never going to work here in St. Louis, and it was time for both sides to move on. But, yeah, the Hicks one is interesting to me, and I'm skeptical of him working out as a starter, and I think part of that is because he never really got the opportunity here, and it's going to take some time. But if it does, it's not a great look for the Cardinals, to put it lightly. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, if Zach Thompson pitches better than Lynn, Gibson, and Matz, what happens when Sonny Gray returns?
Thompson goes back to the bullpen. The Cardinals will say, well, we like what he showed us, and next opportunity he's going to get there.
Should be Matz that goes to the bullpen, and then Liberatore probably goes down.
That's what they should do.
When was the last time they actually did what they should do?
I mean, we talked about it all spring with Scott, and it ended up happening. They'll do the path of least resistance. Though they continued to preach urgency, their actions have not been showing that. I think they would try and keep it working with Matz in the rotation, and they would send Thompson down. I don't even think they would push him to the bullpen because they want him clearly stretched out as their sixth starter. They've given up on Liberatore as a starter.
I also think they'll go to a 6-man rotation. If that works, I think they'll be like, oh, well, let's go 6-man for a little bit.
I wouldn't mind that because there are a lot of teams that are doing that. Now, a lot of pitchers don't like it because they're creatures of habit, and it kind of throws them off.
I think
you'll do it until Sonny Gray's back.
I think that the reason why teams do it is because they need more guys that can give them innings. The Cardinals' whole focus this offseason has been fewer guys that give you more innings.
Yeah.
So I think it really is speaking out of both sides of your mouth for this team with the way they've constructed the rotation if they were to go to a 6-man rotation. Because you want bulk innings out of Gibson and Lynn and Mikolas. That's their only real value, especially for Gibson and Lynn, is the innings that they provide. So to have them provide fewer of those innings when the quality of said innings is part of the concern, I think it would be a huge mistake.
And granted, though I said some teams are doing it, the more I thought about it, the teams that were doing it, the Angels, Ohtani had to have a 6-man rotation just so he could hit and have better recovery. And a lot of teams that do have Japanese born pitchers, in Japan, they do a 6-man rotation. So when Senga came over last year, now that Yamamoto's come over, I'll be curious to know if the Cubs do this with Shota Imanaga. A lot of those guys need a year to adjust. This year, the Mets were moving away from it. And look what happened. Kodai Senga got hurt. So I think that was part of the reason some of those teams did it as well.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. We'll get to Bet It or Forget It coming up here in just a little bit. But next, the biggest difference in the game last night to me, Alex, was that one team knows exactly who they are, even when they're missing their number one defenseman, their number one goalie, and their best forward. So how do the Blues get to that point? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. We've had all of this rain over the last 24 hours or so, which is a little dreadful when it comes to our own personal lives. But Alex, when I look out of my front yard, I know this is the best thing for my grass, because when Green Envy Lawn Care comes by, they take care of all of the maintenance for me, and then they'll put a nice little note on my front door, and every time it says a little bit of water goes a long way. I appreciate what Green Envy has done for me. They can do it for you as well. They'll make your lawn the envy of your neighborhood.
Man, they took it from just dead and yellow 3 years ago to being lusciously green. And what I love about those notes that BK mentioned, they tell me the proper height that I need to be cutting my lawn, how I need to be watering it, when I need to be watering it, so I get the best look of my lawn. And that's because they use products that are only formulated for Missouri soil, for the weather conditions, the turf types. So it's not the cheap and effective stuff that you're going to buy over the counter. Their service professionals are licensed applicators by the Missouri Department of Agriculture, so you know you truly are getting the best work. Give them a call today, 636-757-1600. Tell them BK and Ferrario sent you. That's 636-757-1600 at Green Envy.
All right, alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. As I was watching last night, the Blues versus the Golden Knights game, the first two periods, this changed a little bit in the third. Blues started playing a little bit of a different style, and they looked a lot better as a result. They were playing aggressive. They were playing hungry. They looked like the team that we kind of fell for, honestly, over the last 6-7 games. But for the first two periods, it was clear, I don't even know if the better team was Vegas. The team that played to their identity, though, was certainly Las Vegas. Alex, that team knows exactly who it is, how it wins, and they know that they've got to play that style every single night. It's an exhausting style to play, but it's also exhausting to play against. Man, that had to be frustrating as hell to see Braden McNabb every time you're on the bleeping ice trying to take somebody else's head off. It is so incredibly frustrating, but it's not one guy. It's not one guy that ends up playing 16 minutes and the other 45 minutes on the ice. You don't have to worry about it. No, their entire defensive core is a bunch of oak trees back there. Their forwards are aggressive. They're going to get on the forecheck. They're going to be all over you from start to finish of the game. It doesn't feel like they're playing 7 different brands of hockey from start to finish. They don't have one line that does this, another line that does this, one defenseman that's a puck mover, another one that's a little bit more No, they've just got a bunch of dudes that play to their identity, and it works. How do the Blues get there, Alex? What needs to happen? It doesn't have to be the same identity as Vegas necessarily, but how do the Blues get to a place where they know who they are and they can play to that every single night?
I don't know. You're going to have a roster overhaul. I mean, the way I look at it right now, if you have fully leaned into the idea of we are a fast rush team. Like if you look at NHL Edge, which we've referenced in the past, it does a ton of just analytics in terms of the game. Like if you look at their graph that they've put together, essentially what it says is you're a fast skating team that shoots the puck a lot, that has 0 offensive zone time and 0 goals.
It doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't. And like, so they isolated in terms of long range, mid range, and high danger areas for shots on goals, and shooting percentage. From long range, they are above league average in terms of shots on goal, which means they are above league average that shoots the puck from outside the zone. You go to high danger, where Jake Neighbors has scored 25 goals this season, and I'd argue Jordan Kyrou has probably scored close to 16 of his 25 goals. They're below league average in terms of the high danger area. So, like, that's just the offensive side of it. I think
the other thing, like, just to back this up, they also just don't shoot the puck. Like, all of these are either right at or below 50 percentile in terms of the league average. Well, the way that they do this, they don't actually, like, I think this is really stupid on NHL Edge's part. Anything that's below the 50, if you're below league average, it doesn't show you where you're at below league average. Not like OPS Plus where it says you're this % below league average. It just says you're below it. The Blues just don't shoot the puck. Yeah. That's their biggest issue right now, is that, and part of this is because they don't have offensive zone time. It's easier to make more shots on goal when you have multiple opportunities within one shift potentially, but they just never do it.
Yeah, I mean, you legitimately are one of the worst teams in offensive zone time in the National Hockey League. I mean, that's just the offense side of it. I think you have pieces that make a lot of sense. We've talked a lot about Robert Thomas. Jake Neighbors has taken his game to the next level. You'll start to get more of a threat when you get these guys who can score goals from mid-range, like the Snuggaroos and the Bolducs. But offensively, you're in a tight spot. Defensively, you are exactly what Craig Button had told us at the beginning of the season. Teams aren't afraid of you. Yeah. And your goaltender has been the narrative of your team this season. So to me, and we mentioned it in the last segment, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about fixing the offense and finding a centerman to be a 1-2 punch with Robert Thomas. I don't think any of that matters until you get another defenseman who can play with Colton Parayko to get the best, because offensive zone time comes from the ability to retrieve pucks in the offensive zone. That's your forwards, which I think needs to be fixed. But it also comes from getting the puck out of your zone. And last night in the first 2 periods, Vegas was so good at closing you out that you couldn't get the puck past the neutral zone. They were on top of you, and all you could do was dump it in and let them get it and hope that you get it back.
See, that's kind of where I would push back. I think deciding what you're going to do, both sides of the ice have to correlate together. So, like, if we're going to be a puck possession, offensive zone time team, you also got to have those big defensemen to do what you were just talking about, where you couldn't get out of the neutral zone. They get it back into the zone, they go out and they fetch it and they play. If you want to be a rush team, Then you continue to build like the Blues, where you've got that top line of Thomas, Kyrou, and Booch, which I think is better off on the rush, and you got puck-moving defensemen. I don't think you can have both of those be opposite of one another.
And see, I think you need to throw the idea of being a rush team out the window. I think you can have a rush line. I don't think you could be a rush team. You don't have the pieces to be a rush team. Rush teams, to me, are teams that have that superstar player that can take over a game with their rush ability.
Can we just be honest? There is no team that is a rush team. They don't exist. Not winning teams in the NHL. The team that we would think of as like, hey, they're a rush team, like Colorado, Edmonton. They're not actually rush teams. They have players that went off of the rush. Like Connor McDavid, when he has an odd man rush, that dude is special. Who else could you put into that category? Nathan McKinnon, when he has an opportunity and he's out in open space.
Toronto with Austin Matthews.
Yeah, it's players that win that way. It's not teams. Teams don't win that way, man. If Jordan Kyrou is on an odd man rush, I've gotten to the point where I don't expect him to score. I don't know what it is, but he misses the net more often than he hits the net, it feels like, whenever he has a shot attempt on an odd man rush. Like, they're just not very good in those scenarios. They don't have a player that wins that way. I thought it would be Jordan Kyrou. Honestly, their best guy in that is Toropchenko. He's like the one guy that really takes advantage of his opportunities there, and it's like the one skill that he definitely has. I don't think that's a way that this team can win. I don't think that they can continue to try to win that way. And I think one thing that I'll give Bannister a lot of credit for is it does seem like they've moved away from that a bit since he's taken over as the head coach. They have moments where they fall back into those habits, but I think more often than not, they've been better at it with him.
I think you got to get guys who are willing to do it. Like Bannister has been trying to, but the problem is the players aren't willing to do it. Like everybody looks at Nashville right now and says, how is Nashville doing this? Because they've got guys that work their asses off to retrieve the pucks in the offensive zone.
A lot of credit to them, by the way. Yeah. That was their entire goal in the offseason was, hey, we're going to play a certain style of hockey. We're going to get back to that. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we're going to get to hardworking Nashville Predators hockey again. You're going to like watching it a little bit more. And, man, they have been everything that they hoped that they would be and then some.
And think about it. Like, Barry Trotz is in charge of that team. Barry Trotz is a defensive-minded guy, but he gave Andrew Brunette the wheels and said, you do what you do best. And Brunette has made them an offensive team. They put the puck in, they forecheck, and they don't let anybody take the puck away from them. And you've got Philip Forsberg, who's got 78 points. You've got Gustav Nyquist, who's 63, Ryan O'Reilly at 58, Tommy Novak, Colton Sissons, Luke Evangelista. I'm saying these guys because you have no idea who these players are.
But the
Ryan O'Reilly guy.
The Forsberg one is the important difference between where they're at.
Forsberg one is happening because you've got a guy named Gustav Nyquist who's got 63 points on his wing and Ryan O'Reilly as his centerman.
Forsberg has 39 goals this year.
And
that's what you don't have.
And Ryan O'Reilly's got 34 assists while Nyquist has got 44 assists.
Yeah, but the Blues have, Buchnevich and Thomas are right in line with the O'Reilly and Nyquist numbers.
But what I'm saying is they have a line that knows what they need to do to have success, and I don't think you have a line that does that.
That's what I'm getting at. They don't have a Forsberg. They're missing that third piece for the top line. I think you can make a pretty strong case that, like, Thomas, Neighbors, and insert player here could be what they have with Forsberg, Nyquist, and O'Reilly. But you don't have that third player. Like, Kyrou has not become what Forsberg is. Buchnevich is not what Forsberg is. That's a 40-goal scorer. You're missing that player still. Maybe it's Snuggerud. Maybe it's somebody you have to sign. Maybe it's somebody you have to trade for. I don't know. But you've got to find that guy. And until you find it, you're not going to be at the same level as these other teams. You're missing one more piece on that top line. You're missing a center on the second line. I think you've got to overhaul your defense. If you had to prioritize these things, though, Alex, because I don't think you can do all of this in one offseason. I don't think it's possible. Do you prioritize figuring out your forward groups? Or do you prioritize overhauling the defense this offseason?
Man, to me, it's a 50-50 split. I think just as important it is, and I do think it is important, the fact that your offensive zone time is just terrible. It's important to go get somebody else who can drive that offense. But what does your offense look like if you go get that? Are you trading a piece away? How does it work? I also would say, like, it doesn't matter what you're doing in the offensive zone if you don't have the ability to clear your own front of the net and get the puck out of your zone, which I fall back to the defense. Like, I do think, like, and I know it's tough to do both in one offseason, I do believe it's going to be a necessity for this team to get out of this hole, to get a guy who's in a top pair defenseman and a guy who plays in your top six, whether it's a goal scorer or a centerman.
I think a lot of this just comes down to what the league tells you to. Like, how does the league, if at all, value your players? If you can't move off of the Falk or Krug contracts, well, then you're just stuck. And there's nothing you can do on the blue line. So you leave that as is, and now you go to the forward group. You know, like it might be that simple where you got to wait another year before you can move off of those contracts where people are willing to eat some of the money that you have available to you. All right, coming up in 15 minutes. Over on The Athletic today, they put together a piece that broke down the NL Central. Who's most likely to win it, who's least likely to win it, everything in between. They put letter grades for every aspect of these teams, pitching, defense, base running, etc. I think there's one way that we're going to be able to break down at the end of the season who won and how they did it in this division. We'll tell you about that coming up in 15 minutes. Better to forget it is next year on 101 ESPN. alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. Let's start with this, boys. Bet it or forget it. The team that comes out of the East region in the NCAA tournament will win the NCAA tournament. The 4 teams that remain, for those that don't remember, in the East region are UConn, San Diego State, Illinois, and Iowa State. Whoever wins that gets to the Final Four out of that region, Alex. Bet it or forget it, will win the NCAA tournament.
Bet it. It's UConn. I've said it from day one. Shannon Sharp-esque, just picking that number 1 seed, but it's UConn. I just don't see a team that can take down UConn, specifically on that left side of the bracket, even if they get to the Final Four. I don't see a better team than UConn right now.
I would bet it as well because I kind of agree with what Alex just said. UConn looks like the best team in the tournament right now. I'll also just bet it because if the Illini can get there.
Oh, stop it.
YOLO.
Yes.
They ain't getting past Iowa State. That Cyclone's going to suck them up.
No. We're getting by the Iowa State, and then they can run past that bus on UConn. No,
Cyclone.
bet this.
I'm going to bet it as well. I thought all along that Auburn was going to be the team that came out of here. Unfortunately, they lost in the first round, which was less than ideal. But Illinois is the number 1 offense. Iowa State has the number 1 defense. UConn is probably the best combination of offense and defense in the country right now. Between those 3 teams, I think one of them has a really good chance to be able to go all the way. I'm going to go ahead and say bet it as well, which means, of course, Purdue going to win the NCAA tournament this year. So, Alex, what do you got for us today?
All right, guys, bet it or forget it. This offseason, the Blues will accomplish finding both a top 6 forward and a defenseman in both a trade or signing.
Does Snuggerud count in this regard?
It is open for interpretation.
I'm going to say forget it because I don't think that's fair. I'm going to say forget it. I do not think they will go out there and accomplish both. I do think they will get one or the other. And I think if I was to say the most likely thing that the Blues do this offseason, I think they will trade one of Buchnevich or Kyrou, and they will bring in, with the cap space, with the trade, a forward or 2 that fits into your top 9. So I think that's what they do, but I do not think they'll be able to fix their defense. I think they will ultimately come back with basically the same group again next year, which will be frustrating.
I will forget it as well. That feels like a lot to accomplish in an off season. And if you're Doug Armstrong, you kind of want to take your time in this retool, right? I know there's urgency to win, but where a general manager or a Pobo gets in trouble is when they speed up the process. So, like, if you go into this offseason, I totally agree. They probably need to do both of those, and you kind of stretch yourself, you may end up missing big time. So, I would say that they're going to be more patient in doing this.
LA Kings.
Yes.
God bless you.
I will forget this.
Here's an interesting scenario that I kind of thought about last night. What if you can't accomplish both in the way of signing a centerman or free agent, whoever that is the forward, and trading up in the draft to get a defenseman? So right now, I mean, depending on where you finish the season, you could be drafting anywhere between 13th and 16th. I think that's what the projections are right now. But if you go down the path of potentially trading a Pavel Buchnevich, because you say, you know what, we're not going to be able to make this work, or you trade Jordan Kyrou, I mean, if you look beyond the top 3, because I don't think San Jose, Chicago, or Anaheim want anything to do with NHL players. They want picks. If you're Columbus, Arizona, Montreal, Ottawa, Seattle, that right now is 4 through 8. Those teams, as much as they want that player, imagine if they could get a NHL-ready top 6 forward for that pick.
Arizona's the team. Kyrou to Arizona makes a lot of sense.
And there's a defenseman. There's 2 defensemen. I brought up Silyayev. That's the guy that I like the most. But there's a left-handed defenseman right now who's playing junior hockey, Sam Dickinson. 6'3", 205-pound defenseman who's on the left side, who projects to be in the NHL next season and has looked as a 2-way defenseman. He's projected to be picked 5th. So what if you can accomplish both? Now, look, you got to understand, if you get a defenseman in the draft, you do have to give it some leeway. Sometimes it doesn't start right away. But what if you can accomplish both in terms of only spending money to sign that forward, but trading an asset that's there now that you know is not going to be there in the future for a defenseman that makes you better now?
I told T-Bone during the break, I would trade that first-round pick, not necessarily to move up, though. I would trade it for a player. This offseason, my first-round pick would absolutely be in play because they're at 16 right now. You've got 80 points. You're probably not getting any higher than like the 13th pick, depending on how things go the rest of the way. Be somewhere between that 14 and 16 range. I would probably trade that first-round pick. I might even be willing to package it with somebody.
When Army talked at the deadline, like again, it might just be me rereading too much into it, but he kept talking about how they garnered a lot of picks and assets last offseason, and at some point they're going to move those picks and assets for something that helps them now.
For sure.
And sometimes a fourth or fifth overall pick could help them now.
Guys, bet it or forget it. The Cardinals' 1-2 punch in their rotation, when healthy, Sonny Gray and Miles Mikolas, will be the best in the NL Central.
I'm going to forget it because I don't think it's going to be. I would say Cincinnati or Chicago has it.
Now,
I think it's Chicago.
yeah, just to run through who these teams' 1-2 punches are.
Imanaga plus
Justin
Steele would be my.
The Reds is Hunter Green, and then either one of Graham Ashcraft or Frankie Montas, who's thrown like 2 innings in the last 2 years. For the Pirates, it's Mitch Keller and I would say Martin Perez right now.
Disqualified.
And there's this Freddie Peralta, DL Hall, who's like a rookie.
I guarantee that Pittsburgh Pirates top prospect is going to be pitching for them at some point this season.
They're going to wait, though. They're probably going to wait till after the All-Star break.
I think it's Chicago. I think Chicago has the best potential with that group. Now, that being said, like I do think we're probably a little too dismissive of the Cardinals in this regard. Like, it's totally possible that Sonny Gray, in fact, I believe he will be better than Justin Steele this year. If you told me you could have one of these two guys just for this upcoming season, I would take Sonny Gray over Justin Steele. And if you told me, hey, this year Miles Mikolas better ERA and more innings than Shota Imanaga, it shouldn't shock anybody. It shouldn't. I think Imanaga is going to be pretty good. I think there's a pretty decent chance that he ends up being a legit number 2 starter. His swing and miss stuff has been very real. He's had the way better start to his MLB career thus far, super early, than what Yamamoto has. But, yeah, I don't think it should be shocking to anybody. I would take Chicago Cubs, but I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, I would forget it just because I think Imanaga will be better than Mikolas, and not by much.
Our 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. Guys, bet it or forget it, we're sleeping on what is potentially an all-time President's Trophy race down the stretch. Have you seen this, Alex?
Is the President's Trophy important anymore?
No, but there are, in fact, you don't want to win it.
Out.
Yeah.
There are 7 teams in the NHL, 7 of them, within 1 point of each other for the best points percentage in the NHL. Yeah. 1 point separates the Rangers, Canucks, Avs, Panthers, Hurricanes, Stars, and Bruins. By the way, if the Bruins are able to get that this year, Jim Montgomery should make a statue of him outside of their arena, and he should be given a lifetime contract. Yeah. For them to lose their top 2 centers this past offseason, have no flexibility whatsoever, and to just basically run it back, hot damn, dude, that's impressive.
I think we're sleeping on how good these division races are going to be. Like, I mean, you got the Panthers and Bruins that are battling for the first place spot. You got the Rangers and Hurricanes that are both juggernauts right now battling for the first place spot. And Colorado, Dallas, and Winnipeg's fallen off a bit, but they're getting healthy right now.
The problem, though, is there's no, like, wiggle room for the wild card versus the division for the most part. Those are kind of set.
Yeah, well, that's just because Nashville's run away with it so much. And I mean, guys, don't look now, but Nashville is 5 points behind Winnipeg for the 3rd place spot in the Central. Like, Winnipeg could fall into a wild card if they continue to struggle. But I'll bet this. We're sleeping on the President's Trophy race. But since I don't believe the President's Trophy means as much anymore because it's such a curse for teams, I think we're sleeping on how great these division battles are going to be in terms of first place versus the wild card, especially when you think about the first place in the Eastern Conference team is going to be taking on Washington or Detroit. That's an upper hand for that Eastern Conference team. And then you're talking about Vegas being in that spot. I'm not sure if a first-place team in the West wants to take on Vegas when healthy. Bet it or forget it, the NFL fixed its kickoff rule, and now you're going to be more interested in watching kickoffs in 2024. Aren't the kickoffs just not important anymore? More so, actually. The way that they did this, it's essentially what the XFL had, where they've got like the landing zone. In other words, everybody's going to be super close to one another. The ball is kicked. You can't move until the ball is caught. I think this is going to be really interesting. I like that they decided to do this. I think it makes the play a more interesting. I just like that the kickoff doesn't, oh, they're kicking the ball off. Okay, it's in my cousin made a stupid bet during the Super Bowl, and he's like, the first kickoff's going to be taken out of the end zone. And I'm like, what are you doing, man? The kickoff's never taken out of the end zone anymore. The touchback is also at the 30 now. Yeah, I would bet this because I think you're going to see more teams now definitely kick it in the landing zone and see if they can get them before they get to the 30. We talked about this. I think it was the day Alex was sick like 2 weeks ago. Oh, thanks. Well, sorry. I had to throw you under the bus there. We talked about, like, Devin Hester's not a Hall of Famer without the kickoff, and nothing is more boring than
and like you start a football game, you're all amped up, and red zone just shows like 10 touchbacks. Like, who cares about that? Let's see if we can get that return. Remember the Super Bowl with Devin Hester returning the opening kickoff to the house? It doesn't get better than that. The kick it in the end zone and just watch it sail over his head, that is so freaking boring. I'm so glad the NFL finally decided to change their kickoff rule.
Guys, better to forget it. Katie Wu just burned
Don't
all of our
say
hopes
it.
and dreams.
What do you mean?
What do you mean? What do I mean?
What
It's
is
the
going
opposite.
on?
There's some breaking news for the St. Louis Cardinals. We'll get to it next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and I got to tell you about my friends over at Victory Men's Health. Have you been to a low T place in the past? You walk through the door, it's dimly lit, it looks like a hospital. You walk around, it's grimy. It's just not the kind of environment that you want to go to, so you don't go back. That is the opposite of what Victory Men's Health offered. You walk through the door, and you feel like you're just in a beautiful, state-of-the-art type of a place. You walk in, they're going to be super helpful. They will help you with whatever it is that you're looking for in there. They will unlock your inner champion today. If you're looking for help with some weight loss, you've got low testosterone concerns, they will be able to check you for that, see if maybe that is something that is plaguing you that's leading to a little bit of grogginess. You wake up in the morning, you're just not feeling the same way. You're not having the same effect with your workouts. These are all potential effects of low testosterone. So go over there today. They've got 4 great locations in the St. Louis area, one in O'Fallon, Missouri, another in O'Fallon, Illinois, and then they've got one in Town and Country, and the newest location in Sunset Hills. Give them a call. Go out there today. VictoryMen'sHealth.com.
Terra Henderson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Blues fell to the Vegas Golden Knights last night 2-1 in overtime. They'll be back in action on Thursday when they take on the Calgary Flames. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. The Cardinals will wrap up the spring training slate today in Arizona as they will be taking on the Chicago Cubs. Kyle Gibson will get the start for St. Louis today. Shota Imanaga will get the start for the Chicago Cubs, and we'll get into some breaking Cardinals news next year on BK and Ferrario. This sports update is driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
We got a lot of Cardinals news to break down here on BK and Ferrario with Alex and T-Bone on BK. According to Derek Gould, Dylan Carlson has a sprained AC joint in his left shoulder. He will start the season on the injured list. The Cardinals told him, quote, "It will be an absence of weeks, not a matter of months." As I was doing some quick Google searching across the interwebs, it sounds like this is something that is typically like a 3-week recovery period. My guess is that would then include some kind of a rehab stint. So let's operate under the assumption that he's back right around early May. Congratulations, Victor Scott. You get a month of runway before you find out if you're going to have to head back down or if you're going to be a long-term plan for this team in center field, because that is their plan now. According to Derek Gould, Victor Scott is expected to be added to the opening day roster. He is on his way to Phoenix right now, and he will be your starter in center field on opening day. Alex, a lot to get to here. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. The mic drop feature is on the 101 ESPN app. Also, the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. This is obviously not the way that anybody wanted this to go down. We were all excited about Victor Scott. Hell, I'm personally very excited right now, despite the way that it happened, to see him, to get the opportunity to see Victor Scott on opening day. That being said, let me start. I'll get this out of the way first on the Dylan Carlson side of things. This sucks, dude. He finally got a real opportunity to be the opening day starter somewhere in your outfield after being told all offseason, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, fourth outfielder. Well, he got the opportunity. He earned it. He played really well in spring for the most part. And now, boom, once again, it's an injury that sits into the side. So that sucks. I legitimately feel for Dylan Carlson, but we're going to focus on the other side of this for a little bit because Victor Scott is the real newsy part of the day. Man, Victor Scott is starting the season with the Cardinals, and I'm excited about it. It's one of the few things they could have done, and it's not the reason why you do it, but one of the few things they could do to genuinely get me excited for the start of the Cardinals season. What's your reaction to this news, Alex?
Yeah, just to add on to the Dylan Carlson side of it real quick. I mean, he did everything he needed to earn that spot, and I'll be honest with it. I was looking forward to seeing what Dylan Carlson had to offer because I felt like he finally found his confidence. Maybe you were thinking it was kind of a renaissance for his career, and you take it and run with it to open the season. But you're right. I mean, I never want to celebrate an injury for somebody, but the Cardinals got me excited for opening day on Thursday. Like, I was excited because it's the start of the baseball season, but I got to be honest, there have not been good vibes surrounding this team. And going into the start of the season, I'm thinking, man, do I really want to buy into a team that by the end of April, I'm going to be saying they're done? And now you've put a player, just like you did last year with Jordan Walker, you put a player on this roster that not only gets me excited for what he's going to do, but also puts me in a position where I can see the Cardinals having success offensively. Is he going to be overmatched offensively at times? Probably. But I know that if Victor Scott can get on base, especially if you're putting him in the 9-hole, I got a guy who at least can challenge the pitcher with his speed, and when he gets on base, is going to open up opportunities for the next 3 to 4 hitters in the lineup, which is supposed to be the dangerous part. This is the start of what I hope is a Victor Scott career, that he takes this role and doesn't give it back. Tommy Edman comes back from injury and thinks, man, I was Wally pipped in spring training.
Yeah, and I think Carlson can be the same way. I don't know if Carlson ever had he had a shot, but it was going to be a tougher shot for him to Wally pip Tommy Edman in center field. Scott can Wally put both of them because of his dynamic speed. Now, for him to stay past the first, however long it is, month, let's say, he's going to have to hit. And, like, I would argue, like, they probably don't necessarily need that, but I will totally understand where they say in the first month, hey, he's not hitting. We need to develop that bat a little bit more because we know there's more there. They send him down, and they go to either A, Carlson, or B, Edman. Whoever
Also,
comes
because the
back
value
first.
that he would then be extracting is the defense specifically instead of field. 'Cause if he's not hitting, he's not getting on base enough, which means he's not getting the stolen bases that you're hoping for.
Yeah.
And Tommy Edman can give you the defense in center field.
Yeah.
Like, even if Edman's bat isn't what you're hoping for because of the wrist injury and coming back from that slowly potentially, he's got the defense in center field. So I'm totally with you. The way that Victor Scott takes the job and, no pun intended, runs with it is by having the ability to get on base and run. So whether that's a lot of bunt singles, taking his walks, which he is pretty good at, has shown a propensity to do down in the minor leagues. However you can get on, I don't care, man. I'm not asking a whole lot out of you, but give me like a 320, 330 on base percentage. We can work with that. That is enough probably early in the season to be able to retain that job, even after one of Carlson or Tommy Edman returns.
And I think the Cardinals are perfectly positioned for an opportunity like this for Victor Scott because in years prior, there'd be a lot of pressure being the third guy on the depth chart coming in and starting on opening day. But Victor Scott, there's no pressure. Can you just play solid defense in center field? Like, your passing grade early on is, can you be elite defensively? That's what we need. And we'll worry about the bat as we get going into this thing. We'll see how the bat develops. But it's not like he has to hit like sixth in this lineup. It's not like he has to be at the top of the order for his speed. He's probably going to hit ninth. I'd be shocked if he's not hitting ninth.
I think he should hit eighth.
I'm a double leadoff guy. I'm a double
leadoff guy too. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Either way, 8, 9, there's no pressure in that spot.
If he's batting eighth, I have more of an opportunity for Mason Wynn to be able to get some pitches that he can see.
Hey, better triple leadoff guy.
I have less concerns about Brendan Donovan getting those pitches. Like, Brendan Donovan will take a good at bat no matter what. This gives me the best opportunity for Mason Wynn to take advantage of his speed. I'm good with that. And the hit and run possibilities there. Whew,
yeah. To this point, I think they now have their best balance of offense and defense. They didn't want it. They wanted to play the long game, which I've been critical of them for. Now they've been forced into the short term. They've been forced into urgency, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
I think they now have the best offense and defensive balance right now for what their lineup's going to look like. With Scott in center, I'm assuming they're still going to go with Donovan in left and Walker in right. Like, that is their best defensive alignment that they could have right now, and I felt that way even with Carlson. And what you'll do is you'll pull out Walker in late in games early on. They will go to Ciani in the 7th, 8th, 9th, somewhere in that range to get better defensively in their outfield. I think they now have the best balance for what their lineup can look like in terms of offense and what their best defensive alignment can look like.
It's not the way you'd want to see it happen, but the end result of them having Victor Scott in center field on opening day is what a lot of people were rooting for, man. Let's be honest. Like, this is a super exciting. I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, I think it is. Like, man, when you think about not prospect status, because, Alex, I think you kind of went down that road when we were talking about this the last time, and I didn't make my point correctly, and I want to do a better job of it. Set aside the prospect status, like the excitement of, like, a great player potentially coming out of it. Just the tantalizing, the tools that a player can bring to the table. Victor Scott is about as exciting from that regard as I can remember for the Cardinals.
I mean, people are comparing him to Vince Coleman with speed. So, yeah, nobody will touch, if we're going just tool side of it, nobody's going to touch what Victor Scott is going to offer this team.
He's a legit 80 grade runner. And for those that aren't familiar with the way the baseball, like, it's 20 to 80 in terms of the scale that you can be. And nobody gets 80. But Victor Scott has that for his running, and Mason Wynn has that for his arm. So you have a guy that is an 80 grade runner in center field right now, an 80 grade thrower of the baseball at shortstop right now, and then Jordan Walker in right field, who is this behemoth of a human being at 6'5", 6'6", 260 pounds. He runs like the wind, and oh, by the way, he hits the baseball as hard as just about anybody in the sport for his age right now. It's a hell of a young core, and I didn't even mention the fact that you've got Nolan Gorman right now at second base, who has the potential to hit 40 home runs from the left side of the plate this year, which is something the Cardinals just have not had in a really long-ass time.
Only that pitching would look better.
I'm with you, but that's something that can get fans excited. When I say those four pieces, and 3 of them are up the middle, that's something that if I'm a Cardinals fan today, I'm excited to watch that on opening day. I was much less excited. It doesn't mean that I was rooting for him to get hurt, but I was much less excited to see Dylan Carlson getting another opportunity in center. I get that there's still upside there. I was the one that made the case that there's still a little more upside there than what we probably give him credit for. But there is, God only knows what the upside is right now for Victor Scott. The downside is really low, but the upside is remarkably high. You could get like 15 stolen bases in the first month of the season.
But I'm not even like worried about the downside of this right now, because I think the upside is so much more important for this team, especially like we talked about it yesterday with Katie. You're at a point where if you're the Cardinals, I don't think you could be preaching, well, it's a long season like John Mozeliak is. You need to pounce in the early portion of this season. And now you're at least giving yourself an opportunity. I don't doubt the defense anymore, specifically up the middle, and it benefits your outfield. Just please, Jordan Walker, listen to the communication and don't take out another one. But like, I've got the defense now. Now I've got the threat of the base running. And I
do think it matters, by the way, to that point before you continue there. I do think it matters that Victor Scott is a legit center fielder. Like, that is his position. Dylan Carlson was a right fielder for the vast majority of his career and then transitioned over to center field because of need.
You're putting yourself in a position to have early success. And I think that's the only thing this Cardinals team should be focused on, which is why I just felt like it was awful PR by Mo to use the phrase, it's a long season and we don't want to rush things. If you start off poorly, you are going to lose so many fans on the season. If you start off hot with wins against the Dodgers and the Padres, and some of this is because of your younger players, boy, you're putting yourself in a position where this fan base can get real excited.
Yeah, and that's why I said they were forced into this urgency, and I'm kind of glad by it. You know, I didn't feel like we talk about this behind the scenes sometimes of like, you know, spring training, it's about bringing your best overall 26-man roster. To be honest, I did not feel like they did that coming out of the way they were approaching it with Dylan Carlson in center field and Michael Ciani as the fourth outfielder. I didn't feel like they were bringing their best 26-man roster. They're not, with Carlson not in there, and what I mean by that is not having him as the fourth outfielder compared to Ciani. They're still not doing that, but because he's going to start the year on the injured list, and the 5 guys now that are on the injured list to start the season, it's their best roster. And I know they didn't want to do it because they didn't want to start the clock, or they didn't want to potentially have his confidence get crushed at the plate. Man, I think a ball player can play at any age. You know, you're either born a major leaguer or you're not. I think you can develop into that, but I think you can still see young guys like Jackson Holiday, for example. He's going to be a starter no matter when he gets to the major leagues. I think Victor Scott's the same way. I don't think he's going to do it the same way Jackson Holiday's going to do it, but I think he's going to be a superstar once he gets to the major leagues, and he'll adjust as he goes along with it.
If you missed it, the news coming just a little bit ago down in Cardinals spring training while they are in Arizona right now. They are going to put Dylan Carlson on the injured list to start out the season. He has a sprained AC joint in his shoulder. That is not the injury that you want to hear for a player. It can linger. It sounds like this is a weeks-long injury, though, for him, not months-long. That is according to the Cardinals, so take that with a grain of salt. But he's expected to start the year on the injured list. Victor Scott has been added to the team. They do have to make some kind of a corresponding move. He'll have to be added to the 40-man roster before he can be added to the active roster for opening day. We'll see what that ends up being. My guess is one of Jared Young, Alfonso Rivas.
Forever young.
One of those guys will probably be put through waivers, whatever.
Oh,
and then you will see Victor Scott in center field on opening day as part of your starting lineup for the St. Louis Cardinals. So that is the news today about what the Cardinals have decided to do in center field. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we'll get to the 20 most important Cardinals for 2024. At number 4 on our list, the next pitcher on our list. But next, quick junk drawer here for you on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. In just a little bit, we'll continue our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season with a pitcher that is on our list this
healthy?
year.
You know, like 25%.
Well,
if you look at 5 injured
lists. It's not Sonny Gray.
Yeah.
We'll tell you who that is coming up.
Jordan Montgomery, I've heard, still available.
Just
We don't need him.
a moment.
Do we? We do.
No.
You guys done?
No.
No.
I don't know. You got something better?
Yeah.
I'm told we're not supposed to do the junk drawer because, like, people are always like, man, talk
Sports, damn it!
Here I am trying.
I was actually going to try to talk a little bit of kind of related to sports.
Nah, man.
So Deion Sanders said the other day on a podcast that Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are only going to accept certain teams in the 2025 NFL draft. Deion said on this podcast that both will go at some point in the top 4 selections of next year's draft, possible. And
I hope your team's good, Deion.
that they will pull an Eli Manning, where they're only going to accept a draft selection from certain markets, for example. Deion very clearly does not want his son, Shedeur Sanders, playing in a cold market. I don't know specifically why that is the case, but
In Colorado.
I was saying, they know they play in Colorado during the fall,
I'm
right?
with you. I don't totally understand it either. He said he wouldn't want him playing in like Cleveland or Chicago, whatever.
Probably
It is
doesn't
what
want to
it
get
is.
too chapped hands. and face.
RG3 then went on ESPN and said, quote, the power shift is coming, so everybody needs to buckle up. This is the player empowerment age, and you're seeing it coming to the NFL. Alex, do you buy that? Are we actually going to see that? Because I think this is a whole bunch of hogwash.
Yeah.
I think it's nonsense.
We're not seeing a power. You can act all powerful and tough right now, but when the team says we're ready to draft you and they're like, no, we don't want to play for you, and you fall in the draft and you watch all that bonus money just continue to slip down the draft. Oh, but I got to play in my warm team that picked me. Get the hell out of here.
Principle, man.
Somebody's going to draft you and offer you $4 million signing bonus. Yeah, we're cool. I'll play in Pittsburgh in the middle of the winter.
Yeah,
This is trash.
I would tell Deion he probably needs to be quiet. This is not happening in the NFL. Like other sports, I can see it. Man, the owners have so much power in the NFL. And look at all these guys that, like, hold out for contracts currently. You know what happens? They typically lose. You know, like, Chris Jones sat out, and then he got, like, a 1-year deal. Like,
he eventually won.
he did,
technically,
he did get it eventually.
All he needed was a championship parade.
It did not result in him getting that contract extension that offseason. Like, yes, he ultimately did win, but a lot of guys don't end up getting that. A lot of those guys end up holding out. Doesn't work. They show up to camp late, and then they have to go to free agency and they get a smaller deal.
I think Deion's going to have to.
And if I'm a team and I draft Deion's kids and they say, well, we're not going to play for you, I'd go,
Cool.
Okay, we have your draft rights.
Exactly. And then you got to sit out the full
5
next
years?
year. So
No.
now I'm waiting out a year of my prime, potentially, and having to wait an extra year to get the actual contracts that you care about in the NFL. They're not doing this. Also, in the NFL, unlike other sports, you have basically 7 years of contractual obligations to whoever drafts you.
Yeah.
Like, as a player, if you want to get the money that is supposed to be coming your way, you have to show up. By the way, if you don't show up to training camp, there are some serious fines that are headed your way, which is much easier to cover after you've already made a lot of money than it is coming in as a rookie. So you're coming in. You're going to miss out on that first year, then get drafted again, hopefully this time by the team that you actually wanted to go to. That's another case of roulette by seeing who ends up as with the top picks that year, or if they even want you. I think it's really hard to accomplish this in the NFL. You can make it work a lot easier when the contracts are shorter in some of these other sports. I don't know that you could do it in the NFL.
Deion's going to have to talk to that Aflac duck to see if he can get some insurance on his kid being drafted at some time.
Yeah, I think in the NBA, this is something that you can get done. I think owners and GMs are going to start cracking down more in the NBA than they had previously. Like, it's crazy to me that these owners allow themselves to get punched around as they have like 2 or 3 years left on their contract. Why?
Yeah, like
Just say
KD
play.
probably should have never left Brooklyn.
Play or don't play, or don't get paid. Those are your two options. Hey, Ben Simmons, you don't want to play? Cool. Don't get paid. That's your choice. Hey, Anthony Davis, you want to sit in street clothes? Cool. That's fine. We're not going to pay you a contract because you're paid to play the game of basketball. Like, it's a very simple thing to me, and a lot of these organizations have just allowed it to get way out of hand.
Yeah, and everybody keeps bringing up John Elway and Eli Manning did it. Yeah, and that was a different era. Now owners...
I'm shocked that
Also,
happened.
Eli never should have happened. I can't believe that they allowed that to happen. The only reason it did is because San Diego was more than okay with Phillip Rivers. They're like, okay, fine. We'll go ahead and just take the other quarterback that we really like in this class anyways.
Will happen in that draft, too. When those kids are available, they'll be like, oh, well, we like this guy, so we'll take this guy, and you can go figure out what team you want to play for.
If I was the San Diego Chargers, I would have just said, Eli, you can either play for us or sit out a year. That's your choice. Yeah. Like, I understand you don't want to play here, but that's your option. Kobe Bryant did this, right, where he wanted to play in certain markets, specifically L.A., and said, don't draft me. And he was able to find a way to scare teams into not drafting him. I think teams should just be smarter than that. If you want Shedeur Sanders, if that's the guy that you think is the best quarterback available next year, and he might be, it's a really bad quarterback class, then just take him. And if he doesn't show up, cool. You can wait another year to be able to play in the NFL.
You know what that means? We're probably going to have a high draft pick the next year. Maybe we get a better quarterback.
Coming up next, we're continuing our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season with one of the few pitchers that's this high on our list. We'll tell you who it is next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, alongside Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley to tell you about our friends over at Circus Sports Illinois. Alex, last week we were in the state of Illinois. We were there to be able to watch all of the games for this year's tournament. And while they were going on in the background, we had our Circus Sports app at our fingertips. You can bet live, you can bet pregame, you can bet on futures, whatever it is that you're looking for, they typically have it for you over on the Circus Sports app in the state of Illinois. Download it today. Be sure to be ready whenever the next round of the tournament is coming your way later on this week. You'll have it at your fingertips. The best possible betting is over there on the Circus Sports app.
I've already got my Sweet 16 parlay. I call it the Sweet Parlay Moneymaker, and I'm doing that on the Circus Sports Illinois app. Why? Because they make sure you're bringing home the most money possible, and I love the transparency about the Circus Sports Illinois app. They want you to go check out other sports betting apps because they realize you're going to see the lines and come right back to Circus Sports. Plus, their customer service is at its all-time best. You're always speaking to somebody, not some type of bot. Make sure you check it out and download it today. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season.
Number 4, Miles Mikolas.
Took a little off, and Mikolas surprised Swanson. Strike 3 over the outside corner. A paint job for Mikolas, and make it 7. Mervis caught looking. 7 strikeouts for Mikolas, and Bellinger flails away. How about Miles Mikolas?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. At number 4 on our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for 2024, it is Miles Mikolas. I had him at number 4 on my list. T-Bone had him at number 4 on his list. Alex hates Miles Mikolas. He had him all the way down at number 8 on his list, but you average it out, it ends up being at number 4 for all of us.
What was I thinking?
Here. I can't overstate the importance of Miles Mikolas coming into this season, guys. The Cardinals have placed a massive bet on this player to be a legitimate number 2 starter. And if you look at what he did a year ago, it's a wild bet to make. But if you look at what he was 2 years ago, it's actually not all that crazy. And I'm not telling you should believe it, but 2 years ago, Miles Mikolas pitched 202 innings and did so to the tune of a 3.3 ERA. That is a number 2 starter in Major League Baseball. In fact, that's a hell of a lot better than what you got last year if you're Philadelphia from Aaron Nola. Now, the playoff success hasn't always been there. It's also been a lack of opportunities for him in the postseason because the Cardinals, frankly, haven't been all that good while he's been here for the most part. But, Alex, when you think about his importance to this team, what do you need to see from him? For the Cardinals to be what we're all hoping for this year, a championship contender, unlikely, but if they were to become that, what would they need from Miles Mikolas in 2024?
You just said it, what he was 2 years ago. I think that's what they need for him to be a championship contender. And, trying to go into my head of what I thought when I moved him down so low is I if I'm not mistaken, I had a ton of offensive guys in front of Miles Mikolas. I think the only pitcher that I had ahead of him was my number 1 player this season. And the reason is I don't buy the pitching being impactful for this team. I think their pitching is going to get smoked a lot this year. What's going to benefit them is their bullpen if they can keep games close and shut it down, but the offense. But for Miles Mikolas to change my opinion of that and for this team to hit its ceiling, they need him to pitch like what he pitched 2 years ago. They need to get him into individuals going, man, does Miles Mikolas deserve Cy Young consideration? That's the type of pitcher that they need from him. I don't buy it because I think what we saw last year is more of Miles Mikolas, and you're going to have sensational defense behind him, which now I might get a little bit more on board with because of Victor Scott and Mason Wynn. But the pitch to contact thing just worries me right now, especially for the Cardinals. And I look at Miles Mikolas and say, man, if this team wants to go anywhere, he's going to have to look like the perfect number 2 in a rotation.
Yeah, if he's not the number 2, they don't have a number 2. And I'm skeptical of him being a number 2. And that's why I had him up at number 4. If they're going to preach that they needed innings and they weren't going to go buy stuff, and Mikolas, they're hoping on a bounce-back season, all right, Miles, you're the number 2. Like, you've got to hold up with the rest of the number 2s across the National League. You mentioned Aaron Nola. Look at the rest of the NL, guys. Like, Glasnow or Yamamoto is the 1 or the 2 for the LA Dodgers if you go up against them. Gallen or Merrill Kelly. Like, he has to pitch with the best of the best. And I understand he's done it in the past. I think that 22 season, you watched him, he ended up being below 500, or 2019, 9-14. He was going up against the best of the best and was losing some games, even though he had a solid season. 22. The reason that I am skeptical of this for the St. Louis Cardinals is Alex mentioned it, this pitch-to-contact formula. I don't think it works in modern baseball anymore. And I know that the old-school people are going to hate me saying that, like, oh, you got to have an efficient pitch. No. There's a reason that I look at Mikolas' baseball reference page, and there's a 2.83 ERA, and there's a 4.16. Then he was unhealthy. I'm not going to read 21. And then 22, there was 3.29. And then last year, there was a 4.78. It fluctuates because this pitch-to-contact sequence that you're going by, it's basically a game of luck. Are you going to get lucky some years? Yeah, you might. There's also going to be years where you're not. You're going to be giving up a lot of hits, and you're going to run into a lot of trouble, and that ERA is going to get bloated.
So last year, fair to say that Charlie Morton was the number 2 starter overall for the Atlanta Braves. You guys agree with that? Spencer Strider, number 1.
I'd argue Fried, but
Fried was hurt for most of the season, though.
I think they were forced into that, though.
Yeah.
Charlie Morton last year, 30 games appeared for the Atlanta Braves, had a 3.6 ERA. If I told you right now, Miles Mikolas pitches in 30 games, has about 180 to 200 innings, somewhere in that range, and has a 3.6 ERA. Does that meet the criteria that you are describing right now? 3.6 ERA.
I'd say no. I think
That's what Nathan Eovaldi was last year. That's what Zach Wheeler was last year. That's what Chris Bassett was last year. Jose Barrios was there last year. Those guys are all in that 3.6-ish ERA range.
Innings-wise, where was he at?
Who?
For those players.
I can go in for you.
Sorry,
I just like 200. I think.
I was going to say I'm talking like, is he going to get 180 to 200? Which I'm imagining if you're starting 30 games, you will, and having that ERA. I know it might sound outlandish and selfish to sit there and say no, but I think I'm looking for something a little bit lower than that of an ERA, especially if I'm uncertain of Sonny Gray being healthy and what the rest of this rotation is going to look like. I think I need Miles Mikolas to be near perfect for me.
Yeah, I think I would sign up for that in a heartbeat. I don't think that you can ask a whole lot more, honestly. Like Framber Valdez last year at a 3.5 ERA. Tyler Glass now 3.5 ERA. If Zach Wheeler's getting a 3.6 and we're not accepting that of Miles Mikolas, I think we're asking too much.
Yeah.
Zach Wheeler's picking up like 200 plus strikeouts.
Sure.
And I don't think Miles Mikolas is doing that.
Doesn't matter. Give me the results. Like if you're allowing fewer runs, I think we sometimes fetishize too much the strikeouts. Give me the results.
I just think it's hard to
get. You should enjoy the strikeouts.
And I also think it's hard to get those results without the strikeouts.
Sure, but if I'm telling you that the results are a 3.6 ERA,
I don't buy what you're telling me. Just why I'm skeptical of it. I don't think it's going to happen.
What he's saying is he doesn't believe Mikolas can get a 3.6 ERA.
That's fine. I'm telling you it's happened. Miles Mikolas gets to the end of the year and there is a 3.6 ERA on the baseball reference sheet. You're telling me that's not good enough, and I don't understand why. I don't totally understand. Like Aaron Nola last year had a 4.5 ERA. We all would have been thrilled last year to have Aaron Nola on this team.
Because those guys had somebody else to take more.
That's what Sonny Gray is.
I don't even know if Sonny Gray is going to be healthy all season. And two guys carrying a rotation all season long is very outlandish. And if you tell me that that's what has to happen.
But that's what all these rotations have. All of these rotations, we talk about
they
it all
don't
the
have
time.
3, 4s, and 5s. They're going to have a 5+ ERA.
A lot of them do, though. Like last year,
they
the
have
Dodgers
3 guys in
that.
the rotation that are going to have guys who have 4+ ERAs.
Yes.
Get the hell out of here.
The Orioles had that last year. The Phillies had that last year. The Atlanta Braves
the Orioles
had that
were
last
lucky.
year. What?
I think for
what? I'm not buying, dude. A 3.6 for one guy in my rotation is going to have to cover up for 3 other guys that are going to have a 5 ERA.
I think that's a little aggressive. I think they're going to be in the mid-4s.
I don't think it's that aggressive.
Atlanta last year is exactly what we're talking about right now. Philly last year is exactly what we're talking about right now. Like, these teams that were contenders, we assume that they have 5 starters with a 3.2 ERA. It's just not the case, man. Starting pitching stinks in Major League Baseball right now.
Oh.
They're all bad. You're either getting no innings or no results in them other than teams' top 2. Teams have that top 2. My concern for the Cardinals this year is that they don't have the number 2. And if they don't get the results that we're looking for from Miles Mikolas, you're bleeped. You're up the river without a paddle. You got no chance of competing with these other teams. But if I'm telling you we get to the end of the season and there's a 3.6 ERA, the Cardinals are playoff bound as long as Sonny Gray is what we expected him to be. Now, that's something that we'll talk about, I would imagine, at some point in the next couple of days when we get to him on our list. But for me, if Miles Mikolas is able to give you the innings that you expect, that has to be a prerequisite. And in those innings, 3.6 ERA or so, basically what you got out of Charlie Morton last year if you're the Atlanta Braves, I think the Cardinals are fine. We can talk about what that means in the playoffs, but for the regular season, it probably means you're at least getting yourself into the postseason.
Yeah, that's where I am. He has a 3.6 ERA on the baseball reference page come the end of the season. They have a number 2 in the rotation. Now, I don't think you're going to be favored in any game 2 that he starts, but even in his best years, he gives you a shot. Like, I was at the game they got eliminated by the Phillies in 22 when he pitched. He made one mistake, and the offense didn't back him up. He gave up a massive home run to Bryce Harper. That was the only mistake he made, and that's a pitch-to-contact guy. I don't think he had, like, 10 strikeouts that game. So, yeah, I think if it's a 3.6 ERA, it's a success. He ended up falling right in where we're talking about here at number 4, and the Cardinals are playoff bound, and they've probably got a shot in game number 2. I'm not saying they're going to be favored, but they got a shot in game number 2. He has a 4 ERA, they're in trouble.
Yeah, they're not making the playoffs, probably.
I agree with that, honestly. I think you're right. If it's a 4 ERA, because there's nobody else, we've talked about this before, there's nobody else in this rotation that I think is locked in as a 3.
I
don't think he's outlandish for Gibson and Lynn having 5s, but I would say on the safe side 4.5. I wouldn't be shocked if they're in the 5 ERA range.
Fair. If I was redoing my list today, I would have Mikolas at 2. I would have him as the second most important Cardinal for them to reach their ceiling this year.
I'd probably put him at 4. where he's at right now. Because there's three other guys that I just think are more important for this team to go anywhere. And I think it's the three that everybody knows who they are.
Yeah.
We all know.
No spoilers.
It's the three that we haven't gotten to yet. Your two cornerstones on the corner infield and the other starter that we haven't talked about yet.
I would agree with Alex. I'd still probably have them at 4 just because I think for this team, their identity to me is still offense. And I think for them to win, it's going to be on the offense, and that's why I would still have the Goldie and Arenados in that 2-3 range.
Which is why I had him so low.
I just think there are so many other offensive contributors that can get to those numbers that we're talking about. Like, if you're playing a game of poker, like the number of outs that you have to be able to win a hand. The Cardinals have a lot of outs with their offense, not in terms of like literally producing outs, but they have opportunities to be able to produce with 6 or 7 dudes that we really like in their lineup. And your rotation, if it's not Sonny Gray and Miles Mikolas, there is nobody else that is going to emerge.
I mean, look at them right now going into opening day.
Options. That's it. It's just those 2 dudes. So you have to be right on them. And if you get it wrong, the entire foundation of the team has sunk into the earth, and it is a massive problem that there is no escaping. So how's my tone in that, Alex? Scale of 1 to 10. Good tone, bad tone, somewhere in between.
You were good until you had to clarify. That was kind of a...
Which part?
Now, what to make you think?
I used a word that I would have had to dump, so I was like, probably
now, to make you feel worse, did I say he's right? Or because, like, Ranger Suarez a 4.18 and Taijuan Walker a 4.38 last year.
I was right about everything I said. I think my tone got a little over the top.
Again, I don't think these guys are going to have 4 ERAs. I think they're going to have 5+ ERAs.
And if that happens,
you're going to need to have better than 3.6 for your number 2 to cover for the 2 guys that are going to have 5+ ERAs.
If that happens, then those guys should be DFA'd and go ahead and go with Liberator and Thompson and McGreevy and all the dudes from AAA.
We need that veteran experience.
Yeah, and we'll see what that looks like. If you got a 5+ ERA out of your 3 and 4 starters, man, just.
All right, now, what if we have a left-hander that has no idea where his changeup's going? How do you feel about that?
It's not great. He'll be in the bullpen. It'll be fine. Coming up next, we'll continue to talk about the big news today. Victor Scott, the opening day center fielder. How you feel, St. Louis? Talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Rhino Shield who are changing the way that exterior of your home, your church, your business look. And all of us have seen those businesses on the side of the roads when you're driving and you look at it and the paint's chipping off, the water damage on the side, and you think that building has been around for 45 years. And instead, it's been only for there about 5 years and it needs a facelift. That's why you call Rhino Shield, because Darren and his team are changing the way that a lot of these businesses look around the area. And if you don't believe me, you've driven past probably some of these businesses. One out by me in High Ridge, a business plaza, changed the outlook of it. It's now a fresh new black coating on the outside with a nice looking new red roof, all from the exterior paint by Rhino Shield. Cottleville Smiles is another one. Darren sent me the pictures of it, and it went from looking old and run down to looking brand new. And that's the advantage that you can take by using Rhino Shield. It's backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. It's 100% waterproof. It deflects 90% of the UV rays. You get the coating of a Rhino with Rhino Shield. Give them a call today. Ask for a free quote. Mention my name, Alex Ferrario. Tell Darren that I sent you. 877-25-RHINO. That's 877-25RHINO.com.
If you missed it earlier today, the breaking news for the St. Louis Cardinals is that Victor Scott is going to be joining the Cardinals for opening day. He'll be your starting center fielder against the Dodgers. Unfortunately, there's a reason for it. Dylan Carlson, according to Derek Gould and Katie Wu, both Cardinals insiders, reporting that Dylan Carlson will start the season on the injured list with a sprained AC joint in his shoulder, alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, this is the big news here in St. Louis. Victor Scott going to be starting in center field. We gave our thoughts on the Dylan Carlson angle of this. If you want to hear them in their entirety, 101ESPN.com, the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. That is where the podcast page is. It's all brought to you by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Let's get to the Victor Scott side of things. What are reasonable expectations early in this season? Because I've mentioned how excited I am to watch him play, but I do think we do this sometimes, not necessarily us here in this room, but that the Cardinals certainly are guilty of it, of overhyping and under-delivering on prospects. If you're a Cardinals fan, what is a reasonable expectation for you out of Victor Scott?
I mean, I don't think there should be reasonable expectations on the offensive side. Like, I think what you're going to be looking at is probably what we saw with Mason Wynn last season at the end. I'm not expecting much there, and frankly, I don't need much there from Victor Scott. I think you're going to see learning curves. I think you're going to see mistakes, and I think you're going to see maybe a batter that looks like he is in a tough spot right now, and he needs a little bit more work. I think the reasonable expectations from the defense is going to be great. I think the reasonable expectations for Victor Scott is, wow, this center field now has stability for their team. And I do think that there will be at least some aggressive at-bats from Victor Scott as you get the early portion of the season in, and he's going to be aggressive on the base path. So I don't know what number to put on it. I don't expect a lot offensively, but frankly, I don't care what he does offensively, because why he's here is to tighten up the defense in the outfield, which I do expect him to do, and to be a threat on the base paths, which when he gets there, I expect that.
How would you guys feel if he does for the Cardinals what Alek Thomas did last season for the Arizona Diamondbacks? For people that aren't familiar with him, he's a young player still. He was a pretty highly touted prospect whenever he made his major league debut. Has not lived up to the offensive expectations that a lot of people had for him, but is an unbelievable defender in center and allows them to do a lot of things in the outfield that maybe otherwise wouldn't be possible. But he doesn't really walk. He walks about 5%, strikes out about average league rate, 20%, hit 225, a slugging percentage of like 365. He's like 30% below league average offensively, but like borderline Gold Glove defense in the outfield. How would you guys feel if that's similar to the production that you get out of Victor Scott early on?
I'd feel great about it, because again, I think the hype around Victor Scott was never the bat. It was always the base running, and it was the defense. And if you're giving me Gold Glove defense in the outfield, where I think is desperate for this team in the early portion of the season because of the injury to Sonny Gray, I feel great about it. I hope the offense comes more, like I've been hoping with Mason Wynn. You hope that improves. But if you're giving me Gold Glove defense and the threat on the base paths, I feel great.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I don't know if that's good enough to hold the job once you get through the first month. I think for him to hold the job in the first month, you got to be around a 3 to 310 on base percentage. And that may be a little lofty, but like, what'd you say his on base was? It was like 275. Is that what you said?
He's been at 275 each of the past 2 seasons.
Like that's not great. And if it's not great, it means he can't really utilize his speed as much on the bases. So I think for him, if he wants to be up here in the long run, like, look, I would sign up for that. If you said, like, in the first month, he's probably going down when Edman or Carlson come back, I'd hit the button right now and I'd take that, because I know I'm going to get probably Gold Glove caliber defense in center. He wants to be here in the long run. He's probably got to put up almost Billy Hamilton numbers in terms of what he did his rookie year, which was a 250 batting average, a 292 on base. You probably want that a little bit higher, and then the slugging percentage was 355. That's probably in that range that he's going to have to be in, which is better than what Alek Thomas has been.
Yeah, somebody on the text line said, how can he be a threat on the bases if he doesn't get on base at a regular basis? And I think that's what you're getting to there, T-Bone. Yeah. It's like, you need him to create havoc, and the way to do so is by getting on base, close to 1 out of every 3 times. 275 on base percentage is terrible. It's really bad, and I totally understand that. And it's one of the things that I think is probably the biggest difference between Thomas and what I think eventually will be the case for Victor Scott. Victor Scott does take his walks. He has a pretty good batter's eye. We've even seen that during spring training so far, is that he will take his walks. Thomas has just never been that way. He's more of a wild free swinger, and he makes a lot of contact, doesn't have the best quality of contact, so it results in a low on-base percentage and a low batting average, and he doesn't hit for a lot of power. But again, he's got speed, plays great defense. Now Corbin Carroll primarily plays in center, but previously that was Alek Thomas's job. So, they find a way to make it work for him, and he's only 23 years old, so you hope that the bat projects to be a little bit more down the road. I think this is kind of what I'm expecting, though, early on out of Victor Scott. If this ends up being the case, I think you live with it, and you just keep putting him out there every single day for the defense. And then whenever Tommy Edman or Dylan Carlson return, if this is what you get offensively, you saw what you needed to see. Go down to the minors, get yourself right, keep working on the things that they were able to expose in your swing at the big league level, and we'll see you back up here sooner rather than later. I think that's probably the way they approach it.
And it's possible we're overselling on how high the on-base has to be, because I do find this interesting, because Billy Hamilton, I'd say, probably was the same speed of what Scott is, of probably an 80 grade. I don't remember exactly what he was. His first 4 seasons, he only had an on-base above 300 once. It was 292, 274, 321, and then 299, and he averaged in that span 58 stolen bases.
Wow.
So, maybe what I was saying about the on base,
if you're him.
Yeah, but maybe getting on base, in that same 4-year span, his on base was the 297. If you're around that 300 mark, maybe not even have to be above it, he may still be able to be that impact guy on the bases.
Well, and again, I just think it's important to keep it into perspective here. The main reason he's here is because the Gold Glove defense. That's where the prospect status has gotten him, his defense and his ability to steal bases. So yeah, if we're talking you want to get to 300, that's kind of the number you're at. And I know people look at it and say, well, 275 on base percentage is awful. It absolutely is if you're talking about a guy that's prowess is his offense. But this guy, 275 on base percentage might not look great, but if you're still getting on base 275 and you're stealing bases all the time, what was his conversion rate in the minors last year? Wasn't it 95%?
Yeah.
I mean, you're still talking about a guy who's causing havoc when he gets on base. And, of course, the Gold Glove defense is the most important part of all of this with Victor Scott.
It goes back to the conversation we've had a million different times. The offense shouldn't be on Victor Scott or Mason Wynn this year.
Yeah,
you've got other guys to be able to make up for that. When you look at the way that this lineup is constructed, I think one of the best attributes of the Cardinals' current roster construction is the diversity of skill sets within their lineup. You've got on-base percentage from the left side whenever Lars Nootbaar returns from Brendan Donovan and Lars Nootbaar. Those guys grind at bats, and they'll give you the on-base, and they're left-handed hitters, which is a skill right now in Major League Baseball. You've got the guys from the right side that hit for contact and get on base and hit for a little bit of power as well. Those guys are Jordan Walker, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, and Wilson Contreras. All 4 of those guys have that specific skill set. Then you look at power. Where are you getting it from the left side? Well, they have that from Nolan Gorman heading into the season. And then the one other asset, the one other ability that this team has not had enough of in recent seasons is speed. Where are you getting your speed from on the bases? How are you creating havoc? It is something that all of the best teams in Major League Baseball have. The Cardinals now have that from the 2 guys at the bottom of their order with Mason Wynn and Victor Scott. Every skill set that you would want in a lineup, you have somebody that brings it to the table right now. And for many of them, you've got multiple pieces that bring it to the table. I don't know if it's going to work. The pitching conversation that we had a little bit ago is the biggest reason as to why I have questions about it working, but I like the way that they are operating right now with the lineup construction, and I hope that it ends up working out for them. We do have one mic drop that I want to get to real quick before we get to NFL quick hitters. T-Bone, let's hear it.
Yes! Finally something to be excited about. Mosaic, I am going to go to more than one baseball game now. Thank you very much for giving me a reason.
And he had been screaming a lot. Did you hear how quiet
Can we hear the beginning again?
Yeah.
Yeah, that voice is shot.
He's been celebrating since he got called up.
That voice is shot.
That was Adam calling in with his reaction to the news of the day that Victor Scott's going to be on the opening day roster. I'm excited, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope that it ends up working out. But worst case scenario, we'll see it for a month. And at least now we know. We'll find out one way or the other if he was capable of being the starting center fielder for the Cardinals in 2024. Coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Classic Air Care, who have been making people comfortable since 1926, taking care of your HVAC system. And I'm going to be in the market sooner or later to have to buy a new HVAC system. They've been taking care of me so much for my old unit, but I know eventually I'm going to have to buy a new one. And this is the part that I appreciate so much, the honesty, the upfrontness of Classic Air Care. When it comes to them, buying a HVAC system feels a lot like going to a dealership. You're going to have to spend a lot of money, and you're like, oh, man, this is going to hurt. But you want the brutal honesty, and that's what Classic Air Care does. I've had them come out and give me an estimate and walk me through. They're telling you what you need, not what's best for the house or this extra piece is going to get you there. Classic Air Care is honest when it comes to your HVAC system. And if you don't believe me, check out their hundreds of reviews up on the Google reviews. You are in good hands with anyone that comes out from the Classic Air Care team. If you are in the market for an HVAC system before it gets super hot out, they've got financing available for you. 18-month, 0% financing options are there. So check them out. Classic Air Care and classicaircare.com.
Tara Hendricks is here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues fall to the Vegas Golden Knights last night 2-1 in overtime. They'll be back in action on Thursday when they take on the Calgary Flames. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Carver for Puck Drop at 7. And the Cardinals finish up their spring training slate as they're getting set to take on the Chicago Cubs. 2:05 will be first pitch in Arizona. Kyle Gibson will get the start for the Cardinals. Shota Imanaga will get the start for the Cubs. And news from Cardinals camp today, Dylan Carlson will start the year on the IL with a sprained AC joint in his left shoulder, and the Cardinals will bring Victor Scott for opening day, and he will start in center field. The Sports Update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
All right, somebody on our text line brought up something interesting that I wanted to get your thoughts on. Alex and T-Bone on BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Somebody said, guys, Bader had Gold Glove defense. He didn't provide a whole lot of offense, and fans hated him despite all of those different things because of how bad he was at the plate. Alex, I am curious because Bader was a great defender in center field. I think an underrated, honestly, defender in center field for the Cardinals. And I actually think sometimes he gets underrated for how good he was as a hitter, given how great he was defensively. He ended up being above league average in 3 of his first 4 seasons offensively here in St. Louis. If Harrison Bader were to make his major league debut this season, and he did for them in 2024 what he did for them in 2018, where he's playing borderline Gold Glove defense. He hit .265 for them that season, ended up with 12 home runs and an OPS that was about 5% above league average. Do you think he would have been liked more than he was, given the context of the 2018 Cardinals when the lineup included Jose Martinez, Colton Wong, Paul DeYoung, Jed Jerko, Marcell Ozuna, Tommy Pham, and Dexter Fowler?
Yeah. I think he would have been fine.
That's a bad lineup.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the reason that people were so upset with Harrison Bader was they needed somebody who could produce offensively, and they were like, well, maybe our center fielder can. And if I'm looking at this correctly, that year prior to 2018 and 2017, 20 home runs hit for Memphis with an .816 OPS. So part of me wonders if because that offense was so bad and people were thinking, well, this guy just hit 20 home runs in Memphis, maybe he's going to bring that. He's going to be that 5-tool player that the Cardinals are desperate for. And now it feels like you got it covered on offense, which is why I don't really care about what Victor Scott does in the first couple of months. I just need the defense because I've got 8 other guys that I know are going to provide offense for me.
Yeah, I think he'd be really appreciated if he got called up in his rookie year now because of what you said. Like, great defensively. He would be providing, what he hit in that year, 12 home runs in his rookie year. He'd be providing 12 home runs from like the 8 or 9 spot in your order. Like, that's a huge plus. Even looking back on it, I don't understand the hate for it because, I mean, you just read through that lineup. God, that lineup sucked defensively. Like, people should have loved him being awesome in center field defensively.
He was the second most productive offensive player in that lineup.
Yeah. Like,
the offense was terrible.
I never really fully understood the hate for Bader. Now, he did strike out a lot during certain stretches, which, you know, guess who does that now? Nolan Gorman. And guess who gets a lot of blame? Gorman does too.
125 times in 138 games. His strikeout rate was fine.
But I think
worse
for
than
him,
what you'd expect for a player of his skill set.
But for him, I think it was more like it would come in Gorman spurts.
Totally.
You know, where it was like at times just like, holy crap, he looks outmatched at the plate. But in the whole, like, you're right. Yeah, it doesn't look that bad comparable-wise.
Yeah, and especially given what the modern game is.
Yeah.
We don't have to like it, but compared to a lot of his peers, it wasn't a terrible strikeout rate. I think he would have been more beloved today, given the context of the lineup, because he would have been batting 8th every day or 9th every day. And you just let him go out there, hit 265, get on base. He's going to steal you like 15 bags a season. Yes, the frustrating part was the injuries. He did play 138 games in that first year, but then after that, it was a steady decline, 128, and then played in 50 of the 60 games in the shortened season in 2020, and then only got into 100 in 2021, and that's when he hasn't been the same player basically ever since. But I think Bader would be viewed differently in this roster than he was in 2018. And so that's why I wanted to bring back Victor Scott. They are slightly different skill sets, by the way. Bader had a lot more power and much less speed on the bases than what Scott is expected to bring to the table. But that's part of what I think plays into why this is a good time for the Cardinals to develop a player like Victor Scott. If this player had come up in 2018, you just flip the roles, I don't think people would have appreciated Victor Scott maybe the way that you would hope in 2018. because it would have just been defense and base running, and people would be like, man, I'm sick of giving away an easy out at the bottom of our order. Or I'm sick of him batting 6th in our lineup because of the speed and putting the ball into play when he's batting 235 at the end of the season. Given what you have, though, 1 through 6 this year, I think you could probably make up for that. So I do think Victor Scott will be more appreciated the way that Bader probably should have been, because of who else is going to be making up for some of the lack of offense from your 8 and 9 spots in your order.
And I'll say this, like, now that I get to look at his slash line, now that I'm looking at his career here in St. Louis, this is the slash line I hope Victor Scott has. Like, not this year. I think this year it's all about the learning curve early on. Like, he may struggle in the first month, and if he stays in that center field job, like, maybe his numbers will be lower than what it should be because of that first month dragging him down. If Victor Scott in his first 6-7 years as a Cardinal has a 245 batting average, a 317 on base, and a 406 slug, and his stealing numbers they'll be much higher than Bader's, to your point, that's a huge win. Like, he may be a little bit below league average offensively, but if he's getting on base at a 317 clip, there's no reason to not think he could get 70 stolen bases in a season.
I think you hope that he ends up with more doubles and triples than what Bader had when he was here in St. Louis, but fewer home runs. He makes up for the lack of home runs with more extra bases because of the speed, right? A single that for a lot of guys becomes a double for him. A double for most players becomes a triple for Victor Scott. And that's the way that you get your extra bases. And frankly, like, it's not a stat, but I think it should be. I think there should be a statistic that is like an alternate version of slugging percentage, where if you are able to take a base without the next player having to move you over, it should count as like a different kind of a slug, because that is what slugging percentage is for you to be on second base when the next player comes up to the plate, right? Victor Scott can artificially create slug by virtue of his speed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I still think, I maintain to this day, that should be a statistic that baseball is able to find a way to put together. It would increase the value for a lot of base stealers over the years, and we would have more of an appreciation for them, but I will get off of my soapbox.
You work on that. I'm going to work on inherited runners ERA.
There we go. They have that, though.
Do they?
Yeah, man.
Oh, I didn't think they did. I should get credit for that. Damn, I've been working on that for a while.
I'm PK. Coming up next, the Rewind. We'll give our final thoughts on the Blues, whose season basically come to an end last night. Talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. Hey, we're broadcasting live from Budweiser Brewhouse inside Ballpark Village next Thursday for opening day. We're going to be out there to see Victor Scott's debut in a Cardinals uniform at Busch Stadium. Home opener almost here. We'll be all set up just steps away from Busch Stadium. Opening drive, BK and Ferrario Fastlane, all coming to you live next Thursday, April the 4th from Ballpark Village. The opening day broadcast is brought to you by Holiday World, Splash and Safari, and by Budweiser.
We'll all have the same reaction that we get to see Victor Scott.
Yes.
This guy's voice. Feel bad for you, Adam.
Better, more consistent voice right now. Adam,
Yes.
Jamie, or Carrie?
Adam.
How would you go gold, silver, bronze?
Adam,
for those
Jamie,
three voices
Carrie.
right now?
Carrie is still bronze in this, and I don't know if...
I think Jamie might be third right now. Jamie's holding it together by a thread.
I
man.
I have Jamie at 1, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think he sounds better than both those two.
I think Carrie had the voice stolen from him by an octopus that lives in the ocean. And I don't think he's going to get it back, and Carrie got legs out of it.
Okay. Good trade, bad trade.
You guys picking up on what movie we're referencing right now?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
No.
T-Bone his look on his face is like he has no idea what I'm talking about right
Alex,
now.
we got like
Space
3
Jam?
minutes left. Oh, close enough. We got like...
Same concept.
That's Aladdin, of course. It's
Bambi.
The genie, the whole thing.
It's Bambi. It's Bambi. Traded in her mom's life for her
I get
legs.
the Aladdin one now.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
He doesn't.
No, wait, not Aladdin, The Little Mermaid.
Hey!
No, he said the wrong movie. That's not my fault.
I know.
Brother.
We're doing a whole thing. It was a bit.
Shut
whatever.
up and let's talk sports.
The Blues lose last night in overtime. They do get the 1 point, but Alex, they effectively are done. They needed to get the 2 points in regulation. The 4-point swing there would have given them at least the opportunity to get into the playoffs down the stretch. They didn't lose their opportunity, though, last night. This was lost way prior to last night's game. They gave themselves a shot. They literally had an opportunity in overtime with a penalty shot. Losing 6-1 because they were sleepy in Detroit. That didn't help their case. Losing 5-2 when they just decided not to show up, again, because they were sleepy at home against Nashville. Didn't help. And being the only team all season that was shut out by Columbus, those are the 3 games that I pinpoint that I look back on and say, yeah, that's where you lost your opportunity to make the playoffs.
And I mean, you can add on to it, too. I mean, the loss that you had against the Chicago Blackhawks, the San Jose Sharks, like there's a lot of them that you could do that with. I mean, it all kind of came together in that Vegas Golden Knights game and the importance of it. I mean, look, even a 4-point swing was still making it an uphill battle. You were just forcing the Vegas Golden Knights to have to pick up 8 out of their final 11 games in terms of victories. And it's about as impossible as you can ask without being impossible, because the Blues really do need to get close to 16 points to put this in a contest. And with 10 games, I mean, you're talking about winning about 8 of them or going 7-1-2, which would put you in that position. But people look at Vegas and say that Vegas has a gauntlet of a schedule, and they do. I mean, like tonight they play Nashville. It's not going to be easy, probably a loss. They play in Winnipeg. They play in Vancouver. But they do also play Arizona on the road. They play Minnesota twice. They play Anaheim. They play Chicago. And if you're going to do this, well, the Blues beat Calgary and San Jose and Chicago and give them points, I'll do the same thing with Vegas, and that's 10 points. Just 10 points for Vegas puts them at 95, which means you need 15 out of your final 20 points to get in the conversation with Vegas. So it's an uphill battle. The Blues seemingly believe that they're in this one, and I've seen crazier things happen, but you're talking about a 9-1 run while Vegas goes less than 500.
Realistically, you have to win 9 of the final 10 to have any chance of making the playoffs.
And if you lay an egg at any point, if you lay any egg, I think you have one mulligan out of all of your games. And if you lay an egg against Calgary, San Jose, Anaheim, it's kind of your tombstone being written.
And if you do go 9-1, you still need Vegas to go like 500.
Yeah.
Like that.
And
that
they
is
play the final game of the season while you sit around and do nothing.
It's a really hard path.
Yeah.
And so last night, we can say it, they won't. Alex doesn't have to say it. He's on the broadcast. You should listen to those. Blues versus the Play tomorrow night right here on 101 ESPN. Last night, the Blues season came to an end. He's T-Bone. That's Alex on BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.